Honorable Prime Minister, members of Cabinet and other ministers at the head table, members of Parliament, brothers and sisters all, let us all stand as I invite Minister Lacrette to the podium for the opening prayer.
To everything, there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. Ecclesiastes 3:4. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. It is a good thing to give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercies endureth forever. Now may Israel say, your mercies endureth forever. In humble adoration, we bow before your throne tonight as your people you have created to worship, and as your people you have created to praise your holy name. We acknowledge your sovereignty, and we acknowledge the providential leading and guidance of the hand of God that has brought us thus far as a government. The word of God declares, Ebenezer, hitherto hath the Lord brought us. And Father, our lives individually and collectively is a living testimony of the grace of God that is sufficient to keep us in every season, and the mercies of God that flows like a river wide. We thank you for the opportunity to engage the population of this great nation that you have given us stewardship over. In this season of our political career, we do not take this assignment lightly. So, Father, tonight we do it with a sense of patriotism. We do it with a sense of pride. And we do it with a sense of excellence for your name's sake. We thank you that every word that proceedeth out of our mouths would be words that will bring glory and honor and majesty and dominion and praise to the Almighty God. We thank you that even as we prepare to speak, the weapons that may form against us will not have the authority to prosper. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And we ask you that tonight's proceedings be blessed, be anointed, and be filled with strategic and divine purpose. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Let us remain standing for the national anthem. Hail, Grenada, land of us, we pledge ourselves to thee. Heads, hearts, and hands in unity to reach our destiny. Ever conscious of God, being proud of our heritage, may we with faith and courage aspire, build, and advance as one people, one family. God bless our nation. Give yourselves a round of applause. You all could well sing. Thank you very much. Please have your seats. Thank you. And so, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters all, we are here. Today, we recognize that it's the first anniversary of the elections of our NDC executive. They were all elected on the 31st of October last year. So it's our first anniversary. That is as the National Democratic Congress. Today we recognize the birthday of our founding leader, Mr. George Brizan. Yes? On the campaign trail, brothers and sisters, the NDC promised, once it formed the government, and it has, that every quarter we shall come to the people to report. And we are a month late, but we are here. And we all understand why. I mean, the last 100 days or more have been quite hectic. There's a lot that needed to be attended to. And so now that we have found some breathing space, we can come to you and to say, we'll report on what we have seen. So we are here, and you should give that a round of applause as well. Today's town hall will focus on presenting our report on the state of the nation as we inherited it in June. We'll outline some of the major issues we have identified and present our plans for the way forward as the government of Grenada. And so, brothers and sisters, if you would cast your eyes upon the screens, there is a video presentation, short video presentation of our 100-day achievements. So over to you, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. That's Master Control, sorry. I was just speaking to myself, you realized, eh? Okay, so over to you. We are never without a hiccup. But if we can have it rebooted, we will get you going. Let me just get back We're going to reboot? And I don't know it. Okay. Very sorry, brothers and sisters, but we'll have to, yes, we're going to start over the video presentation. And we'll be back with you live shortly. Thank you. Well, look at that. I didn't even have to ask for a round of applause. I mean, this government has achieved so much in such a short time. Yes. You hear them pounding the table behind me? They get practice in the parliament. Wonderful. Brothers and sisters, today we said we were going to focus on presenting our report on the state of the nation as we inherited it in June. And so we have to outline some of those issues that we have inherited and those that we have identified. And so I want to bring to the microphone at this juncture our Attorney General, Minister of Legal Affairs, Consumer Affairs and Labor, Senator, the Honorable Claudette Joseph, who is going to deal with the manpower issues that she has identified.
Good evening, Honorable Prime Minister and my dear friend and cabinet colleague, Deacon Mitchell, other honorable members of Parliament and of the Cabinet of Ministers, and I would say as they did during the other progressive era in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades all, good day, good evening. Many of us got into political life because we looked on and genuinely thought that our country could do better. And rather than standing aside, complaining about the state of affairs of our beloved country, we decided to try to do something about it. Step in and make our contribution. Some, as my dear principal of blessed memory, Sister Gabrielle Mason, she said to me when last I visited her earlier this year, she said, Claudette, you're well brave, you know, but I'm praying for you. So we, these young, brave Grenadian sons and daughters, stepped forward to make a difference with many prayer warriors behind us and encouraging us and believing in us. And ultimately on June 23rd, the nation gave us the nod. I don't think some of us quite expected what we inherited rather. And my colleagues who will speak after will share with you some of the other aspects of what we inherited. My task this evening is to share the state of things in terms of the human resource deficit as we inherited it, and that, of course, will be mainly with the state of the public service. Many of us stood on the outside and formed the view that the public service was being seriously damaged. I say to you this evening, the public service, as we inherited it, was almost decimated. Those of you who served in the public service many years ago actually will not recognize the public service today. So our task is to build on what we found and to return the public service to the prestige that it once had, where it attracted the best and brightest Grenadians. So what did we find? We found a public service with a large percentage of unestablished workers, sometimes referred to as temporary workers. Now, these are people who were brought into the service oftentimes with just a letter and nothing more, and not a letter issued by the Public Service Commission, which would be a proper appointment letter, but a letter probably by a PS or maybe a minister, and nothing more. Some of them in that position 15, 20 or more years. Some of them almost serving out the full 26 and 2/3 in terms of years that would qualify them for pension, and still being unestablished. Worse yet, working at the same salary they started 10, 15, 20 years ago. In most instances, that doesn't cross $1,500 a month. It's $1,500 or less. Some are acting so that they may be holding a lower post in the service and acting in a higher position but not getting the appointment. Others are on contracts of all various commutations, contract for, contract of, other kinds of contracts. So, and of course, we inherited the established public workers facing the prospect of poverty on retirement with their pension, though constitutionally guaranteed and so declared by the court, not being paid for 39 years, and no prospect of it being paid at the time. So the result of all of this is that we find generally our patriots in the public service, our brothers and sisters in the public service, are demoralized. No prospect of promotion, confirmation, or pension. They generally are demoralized, and therefore we are not getting the best. The country was not getting the best out of our public workers. In some departments, such as, and critical departments too, such as the Supreme Court and the offices that serve the legal complex or the judicial system, completely ignored. So that you have, for example, a court reporting unit that requires about a staff of 10, having a staff of 1 certified court reporter, 1. So that persons who file appeals, especially those who appeal against convictions and sentence, they would serve out the whole term before the appeal is heard, because the one person can't prepare all the transcripts, or people with civil matters having to wait years before their matter is heard. We inherited in excess of 135 cases in that state, waiting on appeals, no end in sight. And this is the state of affairs that resulted in the release of Alexander Clark, the convicted murderer. He wasn't the only one. He was the most noticeable because of the nature of the offense for which he was convicted. Then we have, take the Ministry of Agriculture. All of the top positions vacant. Director of Research, vacant. Chief Land Use Officer, vacant. Chief Extension Officer, vacant. Chief Agronomist, vacant. Chief Forestry Officer, vacant. and along with that, many junior positions. The Department of Consumer Affairs, established in 2018, virtually all the positions remain vacant. We recently got cabinet approval to fill those positions. Let's give our colleagues a round of applause. Our children, too, were neglected by those who repeatedly pronounced or declared that they cared. So in our primary schools, 18 of 56 primary schools with no guidance counselors. Only 29% of our schools with truancy officers. And only two school feeding officers to service the entire country. And provision to pay sufficient school feeding officers were made in the budget. Provisions were made in the budget. But for some inexplicable reason, the people were not hired. And these are just a few examples, but I can tell you that the same is true throughout the public service. So for example, in the Department of Labor, of about 22 positions in the department, only 3 were filled, the rest vacant. So in large measure, our country was operating on autopilot. And again, our cabinet, and we have worked with the Public Service Commission very, very recently to appoint a new labor commissioner. That will be announced shortly, because the top 3 positions, labor commissioner, deputy labor commissioner, senior labor officer, all vacant. Last deputy commissioner that served was our Minister of Agriculture, who resigned since 2013. That is how our nation was cared for. And then, brothers and sisters, we have the situation where in terms of infrastructure and other developmental projects for which we receive grant funding or soft loans, those were by and large not implemented. In the SIAP program, for example, that program that assists small rural entrepreneurs, 37% implementation rate, and nationally, way below 50% implementation rate for projects funded by the World Bank and other international and regional donor agencies, such as the World Bank. Projects such as the World Bank Digitization Project, Agricultural Project, Climate Change Projects, Education Projects, all that would enhance our people, lift our people up. Neglected, low implementation rate because of understaffed government departments and government-affiliated departments. So the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation has a lot to do, but I know our energetic Minister, Andy Hotspot, is well up to the task, and he has put an excellent team together. So we will lift the implementation rate of these projects as we lift the lives and livelihood of our people. So, brothers and sisters, this is just a snapshot. I don't want it to be too long. I just want to ask you to bear with us, be patient with us as we work to arrest a very dire situation that we inherited. And here I would like to thank the hard-working public servants of Grenada who have been working with us to make sure that we turn around our country. All of the achievements that we've made in this short space of time, from the commitment to pay pension, everybody's going to have a nice Christmas this year, for sure. The payment of the dock salaries, the resolution of the TAMCC, the staffing of important departments such as labor, consumer affairs, agriculture, education, all those departments that we are building out and properly staffing. This could not be done, and the continued progress cannot be made without the support of the very committed public workers of Grenada, who are now exhibiting fresh energies and enthusiasm and the sense of national pride and patriotism that we yearned for so many years. So I thank all of you in advance and ask for the people of Grenada in general, to work along with us and bear with us. You can't say with all that progress in 3 months, you can't say we're moving too slow. So even when you feel like that, think and tell yourself, nah, boy, because for us it already feels like a year, right? So this is the state of things as we inherit it, but the good news is this is not how things will remain, because we promised you change, we promised you transformation, and change and transformation is what we are going to bring you. And one of the first things we are going to do in delivering on that promise is to start fixing our public service and staffing all of the departments of government adequately so that we can deliver quality service to all of the people of Grenada. Thank you very much.
Brothers and sisters, it's not pretty, but it is what it is, as the young people say. And so at this juncture, we invite to the microphone our Prime Minister, who is going to tell us about the state of the nation, and he'll come back a little later to talk about the way forward, and then we'll be having your questions. So put your hands together and welcome to the microphone Prime Minister of Partygrenada, Carriacou, and Grenada, Honorable Deacon Mitchell.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies. I think I'm good, yes. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to my colleagues at the head table. Forgive me if I perhaps identify them individually, since we have not had the opportunity to, all of us, reintroduce ourselves to the public since they were sworn in as ministers of the government. So I will start with my left, and I will ask each minister to briefly say goodnight and to introduce themselves to the audience and the respective ministerial portfolio that they hold. So I will start with Minister. Well, in light of that, I will start with the Sunset City.
Good night, everyone. I am Senator Quince Britton. I am the Deputy Coordinator for the COVID Economic Support Secretariat.
Right. Otherwise known as CES. Yes.
Also known as CES.
Good evening, everybody. I am Philip Tellersford, Minister with responsibility for social and community development, housing, and gender affairs.
Good evening, Prime Minister and my cabinet colleagues, brothers and sisters, comrades all, Adrian Thomas sits here, persuader. I'm not living that name here in period. Minister for Agriculture and Lands, Forestry, Fisheries, and Cooperatives.
Good evening, everybody. David Andrew is the name. I am the Minister for Education, Youth, Sports, and Culture, and it's a pleasure to be with you here this evening.
Good evening, everyone.
The man will have to introduce himself.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Jonathan Lacrette, Minister with responsibility for health, wellness, and religious affairs.
Good evening. I am Gloria Ann Thomas. I have responsibility for social development and gender affairs.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dennis Cornwall, Minister responsible for infrastructure, physical development, civil aviation.
It's a lot.
Public utilities and transportation. Sorry about the person.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karine James, not Kireen, but Karine James, and I'm the Minister for Climate Resilience, the Environment, and Renewable Energy.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I am Member of Parliament Tevin Andrews, Member of Parliament for the best constituency within the state, carriacou and Piti Matnik. I also have the responsibility of Minister of Carriacou and Piti Matnik Affairs and Local Government.
Good evening, everyone. Ron Redhead, Minister responsible for Youth, Sports, and Culture.
Good evening, everyone.
You need 2 mics?
2 mics, yeah. Well, once we are in the Great South, you have to get 2 mics, right? So the MP for the Great South and the Minister for Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation. Thank you.
I get to be introduced twice. Claudette Joseph, Attorney General and Minister for Legal Affairs, Labor and Consumer Affairs.
Thank you very much, colleagues. And I'm Deacon Mitchell, Member of Parliament for the Great Parish of St. David. And my dear friend from Piti Matnik and Carriacou will plead for some, over the next several decades, to be made an honorary citizen of the Great Parish of St. David. We'll consider in due course. So it's a pleasure to be here. We are happy to have this Townhall. We are happy to engage with the citizens of Grenada. And as Mr. Robinson said, to partly report, but more importantly, to give you the opportunity, I see 2 mics, to engage with us, to ask us questions, and for us to continue the dialogue that we started prior to the general elections. I will briefly talk about some of the challenges we faced and some of the regular practices that we discovered on taking office. And I will come back a bit to talk about the way forward and how we intend to govern, particularly given that we are in the middle of the budget cycle. So my colleague has talked about the challenges we as a nation face, and in particular the challenges with our public service. And it's important to talk about this because the government is the public service. The 13 or 14 of us who sit here are policymakers. But ultimately, if we're going to deliver on the transformation of Grenada, the public service has to be able to help us deliver on that transformation. And regrettably, the public service has been treated very badly, and in many instances has been, in our view, deliberately under-resourced, understaffed, marginalized, victimized, and we can go on and on. But I want to talk particularly to the leadership of the trade union movement this evening, because there seems to be a suggestion, which we need to address frontally, that this administration somehow is engaged in creating widespread fear and layoffs amongst the public service. And I dare challenge any of the union leadership anytime, anywhere, to prove that. And I will say to you, it's the contrary. This administration said we would pay the pension, and whether it's the 15th or the 30th of November, or whether it's between the 15th and the 30th of November, the pensions are going to be paid. And I want to single out for commendation the hard-working staff at the Pension Secretariat. Who almost single-handedly is making the necessary sacrifice to ensure that this gets done. So starting from P.S. Sylvester, the Ministry of Finance, Ms. Tonya Adams at the Pension Secretariat desk, and all of the hard workers at the Accountant General's Department, DPA, and all of the others who are pulling their weight to make this happen, this is testimony to you and to public servants in general, who we have said repeatedly, after doing your tour of duty, is entitled to be paid your pensions. If we were interested in spreading fear and in manipulating people and in victimizing people, we didn't have to pay the pension. We could have taken the same cowardly approach taken by the other side and dance around the issue. In the same building, not so long ago, when instead of saying they would pay the pension, they were making it seem as if the world will come to an end just to give the public servants their pension. Yep. Well, the world ain't coming to an end on the 15th of November, and it ain't going to come to an end on the 30th of November, and the pensions will be paid. Now, I also want to say this to the trade union leadership, not the membership, the leadership. Let's not pretend certain things. When I was leader of the National Democratic Congress, we tried to get meetings with the union leadership. Not a single one of them met with me. They run, they hide, they duck, they found excuses. No one met with me. When we wrote the Trade Unions Council asking for a meeting, the response was to the request was sent via email. We live in 2022. The response was to put it on letterhead. At that point, I realized clearly we were not necessarily going in the same direction. They didn't meet. No hard feelings. When I became Prime Minister, they were happy to meet. In less than 20 days, they met, and we advised we were paying the pension. I also advised that the issue of pension reform must be addressed. They indicated, and I took the advice. One at a time. And we're going one at a time. We've paid the pension. The issue of pension reform has to be addressed. We have constituted a pension reform committee. We are leaving space on that committee for the Trade Unions Council to appoint a representative to that committee. But we need to speak to the citizens of our country, and the public servants in particular. If we don't address pension reform, you may get pension on paper, but when you retire, you will not have a funded pension. And the reality, therefore, is that pension reform must happen for your sake. We are giving ourselves 12 months to address this issue in a frontal manner, and we hope that there will be active participation by the labor movement, by the Trade Unions Council, so that we can come up with a formula that works for the sustainability of public officers' pensions. We indicated that to have a full regularization of the public service, pension reform is necessary. I never said that unless there is pension reform, there will be no regularization. We are saying the two must go together. And we've begun the regularization because the reality is, as has been pointed out by the Attorney General, there are positions which in the public service which must be filled if some of these ministries are to actually function. And so we are not waiting on pension reform to fill the positions in the Ministry of Agriculture. We are not waiting on pension reform to fill the positions in the Ministry of Labor. There was no deputy permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance when I got there. Recognizing the kind of workload that is taking place in the Ministry of Finance, there is a deputy permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance. So we recognize to actually make some parts of the government even function, that there are positions that are going to have to be filled. We recognize that some of these positions which have been frozen for a very long time are going to have to be unfrozen, and we cannot wait for the pension reform. But the critical issue is this: the size of the government in total is massive. You have established public servants, unestablished public servants, people who work with the government, but they can't even get a letter saying they work with the government. People are on contract, for service, off service, and the list goes on and on. Well, I'm not even speaking about the Imani program. Right? So the reality is, the size of the government is the size of the government. Whether it's 15,000 checks every month, the government issues those checks. The problem is some people get a check, and when they retire, they will get a pension. Some people work for 30, 37 years, and when they retire, they have nothing to show for it. And usually, it is those who are the lowest paid are the ones who will walk out of the government with no pension and with nothing to go by. And then they have to come back for either what you call poor people's pension, for some other form of social security. And so the reality is, if we don't right-size the public service, and that's what we mean by having one public service, where for the most part, the people who work for the government work on the same terms and conditions. It's not easy. We didn't create the situation, and it has existed for a long time. So when we talk about the regularization of the public service, it's not a situation where you get up today, you snap your fingers, and everybody could work for the same money, and everybody could get the same terms and conditions. It is something that has to be done department by department, ministry by ministry, until we get to a position where we have adequate, trained, competent, and motivated staff. We recognize that the government can't hire everybody, and that is why we want to grow the private sector. That is why we want to encourage the private sector. And that is why, when we found out upon assuming office that there was over $15 million sitting in the government coffers, earmarked to help people who had been impacted by COVID-19, we didn't just say, come on, we'll give you $800 a month, $800 a month, $800 a month. We said, come with a business idea. If you already have a business, come and tell us what assistance you need, and we will give you up to $30,000, which you don't have to pay back, so that you can start your own business, and so that you could employ more people. Let me, as I'm there, make an excuse for Honorable Minister Lennox Andrews, who's our Minister of Economic Development. He's regrettably not here with us tonight. His brother passed away a couple days ago, and it's the third night, and I think we know what happens on the third night. And so if we can keep him in our thoughts. But I'm advised by Minister Andrews that arrangements are going to be made to pay out somewhere in the region of $770,000 this week to persons who applied under the CESS program so that they can start their own business or expand their own business. And so the aim is between now and December, on average, to approve and pay out on or about $1 million a week between now and December under the CESS program, so that we can empower young people in particular and persons wanting to start their own business or expand their own business, in particular the productive sectors, agriculture, fishing, agro-processing, etc. So we recognize that instead of making people feel that you have to be dependent on the government every month to get $800, that it is better to empower them to start their own business, to grow their own business, and to expand their own businesses. But moving away from some of the HR challenges, we have a challenge as to how government funds are used. And I'm just going to cite a couple of examples. And some of it has already been in the media. On assuming office, we learned of the existence of an organization, and I always struggle with the name, so let me get the correct name. Have Faith. Yes. So let me make sure I don't misquote the name and I give you the correct name. Well, the name changed, so I will give you the original name and the current name. We encountered an organization called Faith Organization for People's Development, Inc. Now, the organization is incorporated under the Companies Act as a not-for-profit company. Therefore, it should be engaged in philanthropic, charitable, religious helping, not to make a profit. Prior to that, it did a name change. Its original name was St. Andrew Southeast Development Organization, Inc. The learned Minister of Education ran for the beautiful constituency of St. Andrew Southeast. So when this entity was incorporated, it was incorporated as a not-for-profit organization called St. Andrew Southeast Development Organization, Inc. The name hints or suggests it was meant to help develop the constituency of St. Andrew Southeast. It subsequently metamorphosized, became a butterfly, and became the name Faith. But I just want to point out something. In 2 years, between 2020 and July of 2022, this company was paid $6.8 million by the government of Grenada. Now, in addition to that, the then Cabinet of Grenada passed a cabinet resolution handing over 3 community centers located in St. Andrew Southeast to that same organization. Community centers meant for the community, meant for use of the people, was handed over to this company, to this not-for-profit company. Now, if you're a not-for-profit company, and if you could convince the government of Grenada in 2 years to give you $6.8 million, what are you providing to the people of Grenada? And how miraculously the only client you have is the government of Grenada. So what were the services they were providing? Apparently, sanitization services. Spraying children's hands when they come to school. Maybe wiping countertop or chair or whatever, I don't know. But in 2 years, they racked up $3 million in revenues. Not-for-profit companies are required to file financial statements at the company's registry. No financial statements have been filed for 2021, and I doubt any will be filed for 2022. But let's dig a little deeper. Last time I checked, the government of Grenada, sometime in February of 2022, dropped all protocols in relation to COVID-19. There was no mask wearing, there was no social distancing, there was no sanitization, there was no insistence on anybody spraying anything. So explain to me between February and July, elections were in June, and July, what services could you possibly have been providing when it comes to sanitization and so on? And I'm simply pointing, those are facts. You can argue about contract and so on, that's fine. I'm a lawyer. We can get to court when the time comes. And who has to sue can sue. That's on the domestic front. Let me share on the international front. We'll come to that. gentleman of Polish origin, applied apparently to be made ambassador at large on behalf of the citizens of Grenada. That gentleman was told, and it appears that the cabinet, the then cabinet, agreed to appoint the gentleman as ambassador at large. He was told that in order to do so, he needed to pay US $290,000 to the state of Grenada. $150,000 US was paid to the state of Grenada, and there's a treasury receipt for it. Another 140,000 US was paid to the new National Party South St. George office. Let me repeat that. 140,000 US dollars was paid, and this is in June of 2022, right before the elections. 140,000 US paid to the new National Party South St. George office. We have the records. So since the cabinet conclusion said it was 290,000 US dollars to the state of Grenada, last time I checked, the Constitution does not establish the new National Party South St. George office as part of the state of Grenada. So my free advice now is that the new National Party South St. George office, or the new National Party for that matter, should kindly hand over to the state of Grenada. The 140,000 US dollars that magically found its way into your bank account. Now, I don't know who advised the Polish gentleman, but as a good colleague of mine said, this must have been Wagiti Bingo. And you clearly gambled and lost. The gentleman has been asking back for his money. The state of Grenada has no intention of paying back any money to anybody. But I also want to point out and give some free advice to the South St. George branch of the New National Party that you might have to pay back the man his money. But that is free advice. You could take it or leave it. Now, I'm making this point to say this is essentially trading in diplomacy. Or more specifically, trading in a diplomatic passport. This administration has put a stop to this. We will not do it. And it is wrong. It is as simple as that. And for a government, days before an election, to be suggesting to people that they could be made diplomats in the middle of an election campaign is ridiculous. And that is the kind of challenges that we've had to treat with. Because the past administration have appointed people, quote unquote, as diplomats who do not feel that they are accountable to the state of Grenada. They don't want to speak to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They don't want to speak to the PS in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And if you give them a chance, they're even speaking to me as the Prime Minister. So the reality is, we will not accept that. We have no intention of appointing persons who do not wish to comply with our diplomatic principles, with our rules and regulations, and who do not wish to account to the people of Grenada. I will give one final example of the kinds of things and the challenges and how it impacts our ability to function and to govern as a state. Under our democracy, there are three arms to the state: the parliament, the executive, and the judiciary. We all ask, when we run for elections, to be elected to parliament. Parliament is an equal arm of the state, just like the cabinet of ministers. Parliament has to have its own budget, and the parliamentary offices have to be resourced from the parliamentary budget. The NNP administration, since 2016, took the vote that was allocated for Parliament, placed it in the Prime Minister's office, and ran the parliamentary offices out of the Prime Minister's office. And the Prime Minister, now the leader of the opposition, admitted that the Prime Minister's office had no capacity, and it should never have, because that's not its job, to run or administer the offices of the members of Parliament. And so what did he do? He contracted out those services to a private company called CJ's Managerial Services. And just so you understand that this isn't some joke, between 2016 and 2022, CJ's Managerial Services was paid over $13 million. So, maybe because they feel there was no opposition in Parliament, they could do what they want. But Parliament isn't cabinet. And the institution of Parliament needs to be respected. The net effect of this is that when the government changed, not us, I was advised by the civil servants recognizing the embarrassment that was to ensue, because it now meant, assuming I wanted to continue with the contract for CJ's Managerial Services, that the now leader of the opposition, and his MPs would have to come to me, the Prime Minister's office, to have their staff paid, to have their landlord paid, to have their utilities paid. Exactly. And so the civil servants, on their own, terminated the contract. And since then, there have been requests for us to pay CJ's Managerial Services. I'm just reporting. Just reporting. But the point I'm making is, MPs, including myself, have not been able to properly perform as an MP because Parliament itself had no money to properly staff MPs' offices, and are now only now beginning to do this because we have since instructed the Ministry of Finance to move the vote back with Parliament. But when you're out of practice for 7, 8, 9 years, you're rusty. And so even as we speak, the signs for the MPs' offices have not been made as yet. Furniture, in many instances, have still not arrived at our offices. And so 4 months after the election, we are unable to function as MPs because the resources that belonged under the parliamentary vote were moved under the Prime Minister's office. And the excuse that Parliament might be inefficient is not an excuse for taking monies that properly ought to be allocated to Parliament. If the clerk is not doing his job, as MPs we could complain. The clerk is responsible for somebody as well. You can't move the money out from Parliament, put it in the Prime Minister's office so you can give it to who you want. Because in essence, that is exactly what happened. And again, one client that CJ's had, the government of Grenada. So you do the math, 13 plus 6, 19, $20 million. So that is the state of play we met when it came to how business was conducted. But I will end on one final note. We all knew it was an election year. We all knew the budget, when it was read in November, was going to be an election budget. But I want to demonstrate to you the kind of wastage that occurs and whether we get value for money. In the parish of St. George, only the parish of St. George only, 328 concrete construction contracts were issued. for the parish alone of St. George. And the total value of those contracts was over $34 million. So let me repeat. 328 contracts were issued, construction, concrete, drains, pavements, for the parish of St. George only, to a value of over $34 million. Now, citizens of Grenada, particularly those of you who live in St. George, I want you to walk around St. George, drive around St. George, and show me where the $34 million is in improvement to your infrastructure. But I also want to point out a further disparity. So in 6 months, 34 million, 6 to 8 months, 34 million for St. George alone. I didn't see any for Petit Martinique and Carriacou. Quickly bringing up the rear after Petit Martinique and Carriacou is the great parish of St. David. Just to make it clear, there are over 10,000 registered voters in St. David. But the only concrete, the value of the concrete works for St. David's was $800,000. St. John fared a little better. They had about $8 million worth of concrete works. St. Andrew about 4, and St. Patrick about 1 point something. The point I'm making is, if you add up all of the so-called concrete works done in all of the other parishes combined, St. George still almost triples the amount of investment. Grenada isn't St. George. And if we are talking about the development of our country, you cannot justify spending almost 3 times the amount of money that you are spending in one parish to the exclusion of the rest of Grenada. Who was the minister at the time? No, I think the minister is your compadre. The then Minister of Works was your compadre, right? And I'm making this point to say, in total, close to $50+ million was spent in 8 months on concrete infrastructure works. And what do we have to show for it? And if you compare that to the construction that was done on the main road in St. Patrick, it cost less than $50 million. It was probably around $32 million for the improvement to the St. Patrick Road. I think 4 or 5 bridges were fixed, 3.2 kilometers of asphalt road plus pavement, etc. was done. And if you go to St. Patrick's, you could actually know that road works happen. You can see the improvement to the main infrastructure. You can feel it, and you can see it. You drive around the rest of Grenada, where has the $54 million gone? And that points to the lack of planning, the lack of direction, the fact that the past administration was all over the place. As long as it remained in power, that's all that mattered. We cannot continue like that. If we are going to spend $50 million in 8 months, you shouldn't have to ask, where is the $50 million? It should be clear, it should be demonstrable, and it should be measurable. And so I highlight these things to point out that we are going to take a different approach to the governance of the country. We are going to take an approach that clearly says this is what we intend to do, this is the time frame by which we intend to do it. And we are inviting all of the citizens of Grenada to comment, to provide feedback, and to get involved in helping us achieve the goals that we want to do. So I will stop at this point. I'm mindful it is a Townhall, and that we can do a two-minute break. I will do a little wrap-up, and then we'll invite you to ask questions, comments, queries. Thank you.
Brothers and sisters, we're just allowing him to go and drink some water, because he has to come back to talk to us about the way forward. But I'll tell you something. It's very significant. Today, 1 year ago, now, governments get into office through political parties. That's our system here. And 1 year ago today, the National Democratic Congress elected as its political leader our Prime Minister, Deacon Mitchell. You see how much thing we could do in a year. And from there, we had to bring a situation in Grenada where one party held all of the seats for just about 9 years to a situation to turn it around. And believe you me, brothers and sisters, everybody who spoke to except me thought it was impossible. I say except me, because I was always convinced that we were going to make the change. But it wasn't only me. A lot of people you see here were convinced. But most of all, the Grenadian people decided that they were going to side with this new team to become the government of Grenada, brothers and sisters. And I want to say tonight, y'all picked the right team, brothers and sisters. You picked the right team. We have made promises, and we are delivering on those promises, brothers and sisters. That is what you wanted, and we are here to do it. So in a year, we transformed a lot of stuff. In a few months having come into office, this government has made quite a number of changes, as you would have seen broadcast a little earlier when we did that little snapshot, led by the Honorable Deacon Mitchell. And I will tell you, people used to have issues, but you see this team, they work together side by side, hand in hand. And that's what we ask them to do too. We put our young side together and watch them now, look them now. Watch. You see the love? You see the thing? We have, well, you don't call ladies ages, but we have a young lady on the side here. We have a young man. Real popular, you know. So they can have somebody to hand the baton to. I don't know who's going to fight up for it, but they're going to fight up for it. You have young Ron, young 30s. Tevin, still trying to reach 30. You reached 30 yet, Tevin? You ain't reached 30 yet. Young Karine, she ain't reached 25 yet, you know. She ain't even reached, look, she ain't reached there yet, you know. So here now, I call two set of people we could hand baton to, you know. But how long we going to be in office for? Then we have Brother Cornwall, there to steady the ship. Years of experience. We have, look our political leader, just turned 45, you know. And here now, real successful as a young lawyer, you know. Very successful, to the point that he could leave his work and come and take on Grenada problems, you know. And he will succeed marvelously, brothers and sisters. And Sister Gloria Thomas, another one, steady, with a heart for people. With a heart for people, brothers and sisters. Then look at Big Star over there, my God. Brother Lacret. Let me tell you something, after them prayers in Guave, things change in Grenada, you know. Those prayers, boy. We have a prayer warrior sitting down among us. Then look my brother David over there. Another one, you know. Wonderful if you hear his beginning story and where he has come from and where he has gotten to through education. Bright fella. Right there to help us, brothers and sisters, to help steady the ship. We have the Honorable, start off as a Calypsonian. Say you're going to persuade people. Well, he was part of the group that persuaded Grenadians to make this choice. He is there, brothers and sisters, supporting us. Then my brother over there with the glasses and a shiny head. Steady, steady, steady guy. They didn't believe we were going to run Boeing out of office, but they didn't believe it. But I told them we were going to do it. He said he was going to do it, and we have done it, brothers and sisters. That is what turned the whole thing, you know. And then we have the young man over there from Sunset City, Queen's Britain. A young man, and I want to tell you, you see, in Grenada's history, it's always the one standing up to make a difference. And as a young fella, I have a lot of respect for, because in that community of St. Mark's that has been held by the other side and continues to be held by the other side for so long, this little boy stand up and start to pelt stone, so to speak, at the incumbent, you know, unafraid, brothers and sisters. I want to say in pelting stone, throwing jabs, letting the public know what was going on up there. And we go wheel and come again. Eh? Yes, because, you know, the election must happen another time. By that time, brothers and sisters, a lot of people eye will open. So the Prime Minister drank a little water. He take a last sip. And I'm going to bring him back now, because you all were digesting what he was telling you. You know, it's not an easy thing. We all suspected, but we didn't really know. But it was so bad. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. But we will hear more, but not tonight. No, we're going to hear it, we're going to hear it. Remember, we're here for a long time. When I say that, I mean in office, you know. But we have to talk about the way forward from here. Yes? The way forward from here. So I'm going to bring the Prime Minister back. He's going to talk to you, wrap it up, and then we want to hear from you, brothers and sisters. I ain't see nobody walk with pencil and paper to write down the questions, but we have to keep it tight because we want a lot of people to ask the questions. So write it down so you know when you go by the thing, you could just, you don't have to flung there and just open your thing and ask a question, and we will be here to answer. So without further ado, put your hands together again for the Prime Minister as he comes to, let's talk about the way forward.
Thank you again, Master of Ceremonies. I know you missed the election campaign. like so many of us, but you have election to banka, don't worry. 5 years soon come. So, yes, we want to talk a little bit about how we move forward, because we campaign on moving Grenada. Forward. We campaign on moving Grenada? Forward. Good. So, we are in the tail end of the budgetary process for the upcoming budget year 2023. As you recall, the last budget was read on the 21st of November, 2021. It was 3 weeks after I'd been elected political leader of the National Democratic Congress. When I attended the budget speech then, I said to a good colleague of mine from the other side who ran against my dear friend from St. George, Northeast, that the best form of government is opposition. because the budget speech that was read then had a lot of references to WRB's lawyer and their lawyer and their lawyer and their lawyer. So clearly, they were paying attention. Public servants got bonuses, stuff that had never happened before, and we knew money was going to be spent left, right, and center, as has been demonstrated. But the question is, 12 months later, is Grenada better off? And have we gone on a trajectory that will allow us to have growth and sustained development? And we are satisfied that the budgets of the last 9 years have been the same thing over and over and over and over again. So what we have been doing over the last several weeks, as you're aware, there's been several budget consultations that have taken place. But as a cabinet of ministers, we also had our own internal consultations. We've also had our own budget retreat together with our advisors to ensure that this budget will mark the commencement of a process that will put us on the path of transformation. And so coming out of this budget retreat, and I will share with you tonight, we have agreed as ministers, and we'll be happy to hear your yea or nay, to prioritize the areas that we will focus on over the next 5 years in the following order. Priority number 1, health and the wellness of PT Martinique, Carriacou, and Grenada. Priority number 2, focus on transforming our education sector with particular emphasis on youth and sports. Priority number 3, agriculture, food security, and the marine economy. Priority number 4, our physical and digital infrastructure. Priority number 5, our culture and our creative economy. And priority number 6, energy transition and the environment. We will obviously break these broad areas down into sub-areas, and you would therefore recognize when the budget is presented, the tentative, well, I shouldn't say tentative at this stage, the likely date for the reading of the budget speech is 7th December 2022. So we will certainly be inviting all of you to attend Parliament to hear the budget speech so that you can compare and contrast what has gone before and what is to come. Now, we have prioritized health, and Senator Lacrette, on whose able shoulders that sector falls on, will lead that charge. There are a couple of things we commit to achieving within this term. The first being the construction of a new hospital deserving of the kind of care that all citizens of PT Martinique, Carriacou, and Grenada deserve. We recognize that a new hospital in and of itself isn't going to solve the challenges that we face in healthcare. And therefore, significant resources will be placed in, 1, paying better remuneration to our current healthcare workers, whether they be nurses, doctors, or other support staff. 2, training more nurses, more doctors, and more support staff to meet the current and future needs of the population. Health affects every single member of Grenada. Hence the need to transform it. It is not a sector that affects one set of persons. Everyone is impacted by the quality or the lack thereof of our healthcare services. And so it is absolutely important that if we get this right, we will probably get everything else in Grenada right. But it also ties into every other sector: food, agriculture, and the marine economy. If we eat and exploit more of, and grow more of, and consume more of our own food, our own fish, it will dramatically reduce the food import bill, which will help with our food security, and it will certainly make us healthier, and it will help reduce the pandemic that is currently raging in Grenada in relation to non-communicable diseases. And so it is absolutely important that we focus on preventative and primary health care. So as part of the transformation of the health sector in Grenada, our medical stations, our health stations must be addressed, and ensuring that we have medical practitioners within the communities that are available to citizens of the communities is an absolute priority. But we also have to use technology to do so. And that means we commit to beginning the process of digitizing all medical records within the public service, and then moving to the private sector so that we can have telemedicine available to our citizens, so that we can have mobile healthcare services available to our citizens throughout the length and breadth of Grenada. And we are satisfied that if we transform our healthcare sector, and if we improve the general quality of healthcare that is available in Grenada, more tourists will visit Grenada, more members of the diaspora will return home, and the economy of Grenada will continue to grow and continue to flourish. So there are good financial and economic reasons for focusing first on the healthcare sector. So I know my colleagues will bear with me as the Minister of Finance if the budget is skewed right from the get-go towards addressing the needs of the healthcare sector. And so I am making the appeal now to all citizens of Grenada. If you want to know why the focus on healthcare, is because that is the sector we have chosen to begin the transformative process that Grenada needs. But in the event, since this is a Townhall, in the event we are dead wrong, you could tell us we're dead wrong, and you could make alternative suggestions. But I suspect, based on all of that we heard during the campaign, before the campaign, and since forming government, that our intelligence is relatively accurate, that most Grenadians would like the healthcare sector to be addressed first. So that would be our primary focus during this term. It doesn't mean we're not addressing all of the other issues I've identified, but we think it is absolutely key to send a very clear message as to what the first priority area is, so that the public can speak about it, we can have a discussion about it, and we can agree collectively as a nation to move forward on this specific issue. So I won't give details about the others, mindful of the time. I think, Master of Ceremonies, we are happy to start the question and answer and the lively engagement session once you say go. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, again.
Well, go. So the microphones are turned on. Those of you who would like to ask a question, or make a comment, please, the microphones are open. Let me see your hands, and one hand, 2, 3. So, right, so 2 and then 3. Okay, fine. The microphone is, we have to.
Good night to everyone. And to my Prime Minister, I feel so happy tonight to see all of you there. Andy! Andy! I have 2 questions tonight. the first question. I work with GTA on the beach. I clean the beach. My name is Judy Lett. I work on the beach with GTA. When I came on the beach, I used to work with tourism, the Ministry of Tourism. Then they put me over to tourism. This was in Blaze time, they paid us, and I go to tourism. Then after, they turn us to GTA. They paid us, and they turn us to GTA. I make 34 years and 9 months. On the 19th of March, next year coming, I will be retired. I was on holiday, and I went to tourism and asked them because I heard about the pension. I don't know if I in it. So I went and asked a question. I understand I'm not in the pocket of pension. So I would like to know, please, if I in the pension or not, because I going on retiring next year, and I would like to know if I in the pension. My next question is, I walk on the beach, and I love the beach. I have a passion for the beach. I really, really passionate. Pandy Beach. I used to live in Belmont, and I used to go in Belmont on the beach. I think the beach was, but I find now it need cleaning, you know. So I don't know, Andy, if you could have a look at Pandy Beach and get people to walk on it. Even though me, I'll come in out next year, but I will volunteer. No pay. I will walk in with all you. No pay. No money. I will volunteer. So this is my question. I would like to know about the pension with me. Thank you.
On? Good. All right. So, Ms. Lett, good night. I'm going to give a straight answer, even if it might be not what you want to hear. If you've worked with GTA for the last 34 years, then the pension that we've been talking about, it's unlikely that it would apply to you.
No, I work with GTA roughly around, since they turned over, it's going on 10 years for next year.
Right. Okay.
General, since I came in to work with government on week, it's 34 years and 9 months until I retire next year.
Right. So you also said that under Howard Blaze, you had worked with the Ministry of Tourism, and then when you joined GTA, they paid you out, and then you went to GTA, yes?
And when I worked with Blaze time, they paid me on the way, turning it over. Then I worked in the ministry, and they turned it over. When after the ministry, they were going to GTA. That is the last set now I work for. So I think it's the same government, right? So I go to GTA, and I go on 10 years next year since I work with GTA. But generally, for time I work, it was 34 years and 9 months.
Right.
When I retire next year.
Right. So I'm saying, based on that summary, it's unlikely that you'd be entitled to a public servant pension. I'm saying unlikely based on the story you've given. particularly if you're not working for GT and you've worked for GT in the last 10 years. And that is the challenge we face with how our government and our pension, non-pension system has worked over the last several years. So GT, I know, does not have a pension plan. And unless someone was what is called an established public officer who was transferred to a statutory board like GTA, you don't have a pension from the government. The pension you would have would be the National Insurance Scheme pension, if I assume GTA is doing so. GTA pays the NIS contributions for you. So the pension you'd have would be the NIS pension. All right? Andy, you want to take Panday Beach? Well, I think they're controlling it remotely, so.
One. Good night, Ms. Lett. I know before the elections, we did some work on Pandy Beach. The community came out, and we did a cleanup. And that was the time when we distributed the famous eggs that everybody was talking about. So, so definitely, we have the Belmont group. Now, what we did in the South, we have community groups in the South, and we have a group for Belmont. So basically, I will get in touch with that group, and we will organize a community initiative so that we can all come out and clean the Pandy Beach. And also, I would like to put the pressure on the Minister for Tourism that I think Pandy is a place where we could do do with some nice benches and so, and beautify it. So I'm glad that you raised the point, and we will definitely look at it. Thanks.
Yeah. We have this lady, yes.
Oh yeah, I'm tall. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nalcole Phillip, and I am visiting actually from New York. I'm Grenadian, grew up on the Carriacou area, so I'm very familiar with Claudette Joseph. I have two questions, and one of the questions is transformation on education. I do feel that, well, maybe it's more of a statement. I do feel that right now, financial literacy needs to be taught, and needs to be taught from, primary school and high school. We have to try to prepare our students, our population, so that they can be more financially secure and not be afraid to make earnings, make money. And one of the things that I feel that that is happening, we are doing with entrepreneurs and all of those individuals, they are making the money but not investing. We have entrepreneurs that do not have retirement plans set. We have entrepreneurs that are working and is just making the dollars now and spending it, not planning for 20 years later. This is a young community, young government. This is a time that, as Ms. Lett, she does not have a retirement plan. She's not getting pension. And then we have contracts within the government that some of them don't have contracts. They're not getting any pensions. They're not saving. They are living paycheck to paycheck. And this is extremely, extremely important. It's from each island and even the US, but I am concentrating on Grenada. We have to change the narrative. So that's the statement. I don't know, what the Minister of Education, if he can comment on that, if that is something that he thinks that needs to be implemented. It could just be like an elective program, same as home economics. You have home economics. Everyone wants to learn to cook, sew, and all of those things. Everyone needs to know how to save and invest. So this is something I think that needs to be implemented.
You want to take the question? You want to respond one time? Yeah, let's do one at a time.
So I was kind of waiting for you to finish the other statement.
Okay.
But thank you. This is certainly something that we are paying attention to. And in fact, currently in schools, there is a bit of attention paid to that through programs like the Junior Achievement. We have corporate entities like the credit unions and some of those entities that deliberately assist in doing trainings with even primary school students. So there's a bit of that taking place, but we acknowledge that there is room for a lot more deliberate intervention to ensure that there's a lot more financial literacy and savvy among our students going forward. And so we are prepared to include and incorporate a lot more financial literacy and training and in our teaching to our students. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So that's one. The second is the culture and creative economy. So this weekend, we had the 1261 Film Festival. And this is the 4th year that this festival has been happening in Grenada. This year, we concentrated on local, regional, and international, especially Nollywood films. We currently have 2 well-known celebrities that we brought in, one directly from Nigeria, and then we have from Atlanta. We brought in several different publishing companies also. And I wanted the government, who is in culture and creative, sorry? Who is going to be concentrating? Okay. So I want Ron, can you please tell us how are you going to utilize the growth of the creative economy, knowing that we do have the 2 celebrities here right now?
All right. I will ask Mr. Orlando Romain, advisor in the Ministry of Economic Development with specific responsibility for the creative economy and ICT, to respond to the question.
Yeah.
And I would just say I met with the colleagues who were brought in.
Yes.
First, to show my appreciation for them choosing to come to Grenada, and also to let them know that our government is serious about developing to the fullest extent possible the creative economy in Grenada, because we appreciate its potential to, in a sense, be mind-blowing as it relates to young people and their ability to earn income anywhere in the world. But I will let Orlando talk through some of the plans we have to literally start that side of our economy, because very few people are currently engaged in it.
Ms. Phillip, thank you for the question. In fact, after this meeting, I'm actually meeting with several of those persons who you brought in to discuss possibilities in that same sector. So our government is very focused on the prospects that that particular sector offers. As I always say, we live in the information age. It's the most consumed commodity after air and water. Netflix, books, documentaries, movies, video games, they all make up a very profitable sector which can drive not only job creation, but also significant export earnings. It also sets a basis for the generation of wealth on a continuous basis. The Marleys, for example, their family will be earning revenues for generations to come. And they can now think of how do they add additional value, because they don't have to worry about baseline revenue, because the creative economy allows persons to generate revenue on a continuous basis. So what we have done is taken a very strategic approach towards developing that sector. The first thing we're going to establish is our Office of Creative Affairs, which will be in the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development. We're going to staff that office with a very clear mandate to develop the right environment for creatives to flourish and for us to develop a very strong and competitive export service for the creative industry, exporting ideas, exporting products and services, and exporting essentially our knowledge and our culture. We have decided as a strategic move to separate for now culture from the creative economy because we want culture to focus on developing the art form. Culture is going to be the element that is sort of the incubator, where we develop our people to then participate in the creative economy, where we can then export those services. So it's going to take some time, but we do plan to move very aggressive. The first year, the budget focuses on policy, strategy, and developing the infrastructure. We also have a few programs lined out for developing human resource capacity, training, and a big item is to show that the government is committed to the development by investing directly in the creative economy by establishing a creative industry development fund, where we would use that fund to support companies we believe that have the export potential based on their services to help them strengthen their organization, strengthen their ideas, and make it more export ready. We also need to focus a lot on developing the external services. So there's the creative industry and then there's the creative economy. The industry is the actual practitioners, the filmmakers, the videographers, the writers, but there's a much larger body that supports that particular sector, which is the financial institutions, the education institutions, the legal entities, government. And so we want to ensure that when a filmmaker goes to a financial institution, they understand the business and they can actually assess the value of that type of investment. We also have to look at new types of financing for that particular sector simply because of the nature of the sector. And so we'll be working with the diaspora and other entities to ensure that we can build out subsidiary financing modules for the creative economy. But as I said, it's something that we believe can offer significant opportunities for our country. And it isn't transformative in its nature simply because it allows almost every Grenadian to participate in it. It doesn't matter your education level, your socioeconomic background, anybody who can think can participate. Additionally, it provides the opportunity for our senior citizens to extend their productive life. When anybody retires, they retire with a story, a narrative. They can write books, they can write documentaries, they can do TV series. And we plan to use the creative economy to actually extend that productive life of our citizens. So there's a lot of things we have planned, but the first step is to start that Office of Creative Affairs, which will then drive the agenda of the creative economy.
I just have one thing. What is the timeline? Because currently I know that there are a lot of filmmakers that, just did some, like, I would say probably like Amanda, John. All of those people are currently and actively working in the industry. And what is the support right now? Because they need it now. They need the support now.
Again, I believe in measuring 3 times and cutting once. All right, so it is putting the infrastructure in place. Right now, there's no infrastructure in place for supporting the creative economy. You either have to
sorry.
We want to ensure that the office is set up, and the timeline for that is possibly by mid-November. The office will be up and running. We do plan to have either in mid-December or early January our first cultural and creative industry symposium, where we'll bring all the players together, the financial institutions, the education institutions, the actual practitioners in the field, to discuss the vision for that particular sector. Because we have our vision, but we want to hear the vision and the challenges of the actual practitioners. From that, we will then launch a research project to understand the current contribution the sector provides to the economy, GDP, number of employment, who are the players, what are the sectors. We'll then use that information to build out a 5 to 10 year strategy, which will then drive the growth of the sector. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen probably within the next, you will see activities within the next couple of months for sure. In terms of the current providers on island, I guess next month, once the office is up and running, we'll do a lot of advertising to understand and explain the services that's available in that particular office, which will be able to help a lot of those particular practitioners.
Sorry, just to piggyback, because I'm trying to pull out, some more, I know, don't get upset, but but I wanted to know whether or not, I want to know whether or not if we are, as creatives, if they will be able to, how are you going to reach out to them? Is there going to be a portal? Is going to be all of those stuff? Because the fact is that at that specific event for the film festival, we all knew about it, and no representative was there from the government. You're talking about a cultural event, and no one was there to greet those people.
Well, as the Prime Minister mentioned, he actually had a meeting with all those persons who were there to discuss, the possibilities of working together. I am meeting with them at 9 o'clock tonight to discuss further projects. So we have engaged the persons from that festival. Mm-hmm. I'm actually in constant contact with Mashida Phillip, who is the director and founder of that particular festival. I know that. And as I mentioned, we are going to have a cultural and creative industry symposium either in December or January, where we'll bring together all these stakeholders, all the players, right, within the diaspora and locally to discuss the vision and hear their input for developing the sector.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir. Yep.
I should like you. Yes. Are you ready? Yeah, good. Yeah, pleasant good night to Prime Minister, brother, and Cabinet. Good night to brothers and sisters. Good night to brothers and sisters in the diaspora as well. So, Prime Minister, junior campaign, you mentioned about adult literacy class.
Yes.
But first of all, let me track back a bit. My name is Claudius Mona, and I'm from the Carriacou as well. Yes, so you mentioned about adult literacy class junior campaign. I'm looking forward for that because I am a recipient of adult literacy class. Never had the opportunity to win the secondary school, but I achieved 3 CXC subjects, and I'm proud of myself. There are quite a number of people in our society that does not have that opportunity. And I'm looking forward to see that you do something so that they could get the opportunity just as I did. My second question is to the Minister of Education. In the 2022 CXC CSEC examination, CXC was concerned about the number of students that sit in the exam and not coming out with any passes. And that is a deep concern. I mean, I'm touched by that. Because I, as I said, did not win secondary school, and I was able to achieve that. And the students who go to secondary school cannot achieve it. Something had to be wrong.
Very wrong.
Right? So, Minister of Education, I don't know what plans you have to address that. I'm not going to blame the teachers, I'm not going to blame the parents, but something has to work out so that to see our young people should be able to have at least 3 or 4 passes from the exam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for both your questions. To the first question on adult literacy, it's an area that we are definitely going to put attention on. We are going to span from early childhood education. Yes, we're going to focus on the mainstream, but we are also going to focus on adult and continuing education. We are clear that this must happen. At the moment, in fact, when Prime Minister and our colleagues talked about how we met things, there is absolutely no department focusing early childhood, not early childhood, but adult and continuing education at the ministry at the moment. only today I had discussions with our PS. We are aware that if our students are supposed to be appropriately helped by their parents, parents too, many of them need the help themselves. The methodologies are changing. The ICT and the technologies that our parents did not grow up with, they need to be brought up to speed to be able to more appropriately help our nation's children with the e-learning. So we are moving into e-learning and all of these things, and our parents need to be brought on par. And so we are quite aware that there is a significant duty that we have to provide adult and continuing education. So have no fear, sir. It's just a matter of time before you see rollout of adult and continuing education department and programs within our Ministry of Education, right? On the second question of the low passes, that's a very disturbing concern for all of us in education and in fact the nation. And we've been discussing that, and there are obviously very many different viewpoints as to where, but at the end of the day, the performances remain low, and we can't have it. Part of the transformation is to address this. And so a number of different approaches have already been taken to look into the causation for that. In fact, I've commissioned my curriculum officers, for instance, in mathematics, and the literacies and the languages, to clinically identify what are those debilitating factors. Because we have indeed skilled technocrats in our ministry. Sadly, for a long time, many of them have not been duly engaged. But under my stewardship as Minister for Education, I am going to deliberately engage the technocrats that we have within the Ministry of Education. And so I've already spoken with the head of curriculum so that a deep dive can be taken by the math curriculum officers, by the language curriculum officers, to determine what are the key underlying issues that they have determined need addressing. I've had consultation with other stakeholders too, universities, who are all willing to pitch in. But I'm key on allowing my team players within the ministry to have a pretty good say, because they are the implementers. They are the ones walking the streets. And so we are looking at that. We are also going to incentivize performances in some subject areas, and you'll probably hear more about that at a future point. But there are several approaches that we are going to take to address the low performances of our students in some particular sectors and areas. Thank you very much for that question, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Over to you, sir.
To our Honorable Prime Minister and Cabinet of Ministers, my wife and I came here primarily for two reasons. One, to offer our sincere congratulations on your new government.
Thank you.
We also came because we are concerned of a particular piece of road that we have been experiencing deep concern for a long, long time. So I need to know if there is still an opportunity existing to add to the 23 budget improvement of that road, because we were off the island for some time, and then when we came back, the Marshall Construction Company brought over to us a member of our MP's staff, I believe his name was Mr. Phillip, to look at a section of the road from the intersection of Bishop Highway and Callis Hill. That back road leading to St. George's University, where you pass the Catholic Church, you pass the Home for the Aged, and a building that is run by Louison. Well, that road has been a pariah for a long time. We built a house there on that road, 2000, and subsequent members of Parliament and caretakers were approached to have that road repaired. But cosmetically, things were done, patchwork was done. But with the Marshall Construction service nearby and the heavy trucks, that daily use that road has never maintained any stability. whether it was cosmetically done or otherwise. So I'm asking if there is still an opportunity available in the 223 budget to improve that road. And because I was told by at least Mr. Steele the last time that it was not in the budget, so they could not commit to any improvement to that road. I'm now asking, in particular, Mr. Williams, if there is an opportunity to improve that road, and it was tabled in the 2023 budget. That's one of the two items pertaining to that particular road. The other item is right in front of where our house is built. It's a gated house, gated community. There is a hollow piece of road where when it rains, water settles there, and it stays there for a better part of a week. If you drive by now, you can see the water settling there. That water is contaminated because it came from the informal settlers up on a hill, and it runs down, and it settles there in front of the house. There are kids that have to use that road almost every day to go to school, and they would walk into that water. And I would encourage them not to do so because that water is a health issue. This is something that my wife and I have long-sufferingly been asking to be addressed. So I hope my comment tonight, some opportunity does still exist to be placed in the budget to take care of that problem.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, we'll have Andy answer.
One. Now, I know exactly what you are speaking about. A few weeks ago, myself and the person in charge on the infrastructure for that area, we visited that road. And I know in particular, where you live, it's hollow. And we also looked at the drainage, because drainage is a problem. When the water comes from the hill, it settles right there. So I even went down to into your property to look and see where the water will drain, because when you are doing roads, drainage is very important. And let me just say that it is something that will be done, right? Mr. Cornwall, I know Mr. Cornwall will support me 100%, right? So I assure you that we will do the road, right? I see, I mean, you know, it's, because from time to time I will go to the Catholic Church. And also we did a development on the Calais Bay. And we will be driving through that road from time to time. And I've seen it. So I feel your pain. And I will say that, rest assured, that it will be done.
Thank you, Minister. Now, the road requires an expenditure which would require to be budgeted. Now, your representative told me just before my wife and I went away for medical reasons that the water settling area, because of the health issue, can be, and it doesn't require that much expenditure. So they will take care of it almost immediately. That was in, I believe it was July or early August. And it's still, the health issue is still there. And that doesn't really require a lot of expenditure. So when will that part of it be addressed?
Well, I am the MP for the area, right? I'm the MP for the area, and since June. And I know that I went, I looked at it, and I even brought the road officer, that's Peter Charles, to look at it also. We assessed it. Well, we could not have done anything, even though we wanted to, because we had to first pass a supplementary budget, which we just passed in Parliament. But I'm saying this to say that I've seen it, and I'm saying rest assured that I will work with the Ministry of Infrastructure to ensure the road is completed. And you have my word on that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, I didn't see a hand, and I saw others over there, so you had to work with me. Yes.
Good night, Honorable Prime Minister and ministers. I just wanted to make a comment to the gentleman who talked about the adult literacy class. I volunteer for an organization called ALEG, Adult Literacy Initiative of Grenada. And we are restarting classes in January. We're currently writing curriculum for the organization and to restart adult literacy classes. So if you're interested, please look out for us. And we will be definitely speaking to the Minister of Education to talk about building out an adult literacy framework for Grenada, because we currently don't have one. So it is definitely in the pipeline for the organization. So first, a comment. And a second, a question based on the priorities that were set out for the budget. I noticed there were 6 priorities listed, but tourism was not mentioned. So I just wanted to get some background and maybe some more information to hear why tourism was not mentioned in those priorities. Thank you.
No.
I'm good? I'm good, right. So, tourism was not mentioned because, to some extent, we think tourism has been the industry that has been the focal point of Grenada's development over the last 20 years, perhaps. And we believe that the areas we've identified will, in fact, help to strengthen and transform our tourism industry to get to a place where it needs to get. So, when we talk about transforming our healthcare services, that's directly linked to transforming our tourism. Because I can tell you, if I was a wealthy tourist and I wanted to visit Grenada, and I heard that the hospital services are not so good if something happened to me here, I'd think twice about coming. If I'm a returning national and then I have to jump on a plane to head back to Canada or to head back to New York or Atlanta or wherever to get routine medical checkup, I'd probably think twice about coming to Grenada. You know, tourists tend to be adventurous when they travel. Someone is more likely to think about doing cosmetic surgery when they travel. They're more likely to think about doing some tummy tuck when they travel. So if you really want to promote, for example, tourism and health tourism, you kind of need to fix the healthcare and get it to world-class standards. And that is how you promote another aspect of tourism. So that when people come here, they actually have something to do if they wish to be adventurous in the healthcare facilities. So yes, we have lovely beaches. Yes, we have lovely hotels, waterfalls, etc. But the reality is, if the health services are not at the standard that it needs to be, then our tourism will in fact stagnate. The same goes for culture, the arts, the creative economy. People don't just travel for traveling's sake. They want an experience. They want to learn. They want to experience something. Let's take our food. Food is part of the creative economy. But if when you get to the hotels, what you get is the same burger and fries and the same steak, and you're not getting authentic Grenadian cuisine that is mind-blowing, that makes you want to then buy a product and take back to wherever you come from, and that allows our exporters then to export that product to you because you've tasted avocado ice cream that you never tasted anywhere else in the world, then there is no opportunity for our farmers and our agro-processors to be linked to our tourism industry. So when we talk about things like food security and reducing the import bill, the reality is that the folks in the tourism business now, in the hotels, are coming to us and saying, can we get more concessions to import food into Grenada because we can't find the food to buy in Grenada. We can't supply the chicken. We can't supply the fish. I'll give you an example, and that's where we talk about the marine industry. Our fishermen still sell fish to hotels, not filleting them. Nobody wants to buy fish and then have to go fight to take the bone out of it. So I'm saying you can literally create an entire industry just filleting the fish, and then you sell it on to the hotels at a much more expensive price. And they will pay for it, right? But that's the challenge we have. So we can't, the focus has to be on a lot of the other linkages that will transform Grenada. Let's take the developments in the north of the island. You think a tourist is going to come to Grenada and spend 2 hours on our winding, narrow roads to get to a hotel in Levera? If we can't transform our physical infrastructure so that they get there in 40 or 45 minutes, it's never going to happen. So when we talk about transformation, that needs to happen, right? If that happens, if you can build infrastructure that can get you to St. Patrick's in 40 minutes or 45 minutes, the hotels will be built. Because you can't even bring the construction material up to St. Patrick on the existing state of our roads. Hence the reason for focusing on our physical infrastructure. So that's just basic reasons, but there are other things that we focus on. When we say physical infrastructure, we're talking about air connectivity. You can't get to Grenada right now. It is virtually impossible. It is extremely expensive, and the flights are limited. So we spent a lot of time advocating, speaking with, negotiating to boost air connectivity to Grenada. Thankfully, I'm happy to report the Minister of Civil Aviation is here, that come this winter season, British Airways is adding an extra flight, Condo is resuming flights, Air Canada will be flying into Grenada. We are now currently negotiating with Inter-Caribbean to get additional flights into Grenada regionally. We expect that Caribbean Airlines will, between now and the middle of November, increase flights from Trinidad so that at least there's 1 flight per week. So although we are not talking tourism, we are doing everything to ensure that, in fact, tourism is sustained. We will be reviewing our entire tourism incentives package to make sure that we remain competitive and modern. And then you have to recall that there are several tourism projects that are taking place now that is essentially actively funded via the CBI project, as well as program, as well as the incentive packages that we give to tourism. And part of the reason we are focusing on education is that our education system itself has to be directly linked to a tourism product. Not just the bed makers, the pool guys, and the housekeepers, but senior management, mid-level management, the chefs. And so our curriculum has to be directly twinned and reshaped to match that. So when we talk about transformation in education, when we transform our education when it comes to hospitality arts, it will help transform our tourism sector. So that is the reason why we are focusing on foundational issues that will truly drive the transformation in some of the private sector areas like the tourism industry. And then finally, the marine industry. There are a number of things we're doing. We intend to spend significant resources to transform PT Martinique and Carriacou into the dive capital of the world. The cruise ships are going to be calling in Carriacou this season. We are working on ensuring that the airlift between Grenada and Carriacou continues beyond November and December by ensuring that there's continued regular air service. Because if a tourist gets to Grenada and they want to see Carriacou, they can't because there's no airlift service. So we are doing all of those things to ensure that, in fact, tourism continues to grow and continues to blossom and continues to be one of the leading industries in Grenada. And then I will address one final point. Energy transition. When we talk about energy transition, we are talking about moving away from burning diesel and hydrocarbons into renewables. And we will take deliberate and sustained effort to do this. The aim ultimately is to reduce the kilowatt costs for electricity in Grenada. If we can significantly reduce the cost of producing electricity in Grenada, we can significantly transform our tourism sector. Because the two biggest cost initiatives for hotels in particular is the cost of electricity. That's one of the biggest issues they always talk about. And next, obviously, is the cost of labor. We can't reduce the cost of labor. The truth is we want to increase the cost of labor because we want our workers to earn more. Yep. And so the area that we need to focus on is the cost of electricity. And so we are exploring significant renewable energy projects, both in terms of solar and in terms of wind and in terms of geothermal. And if we are able to do this, and we believe we can do this, and we can significantly reduce the cost of electricity, then I guarantee you tourism will continue to soar all the way. So those are the underlying areas that we're focusing on, all with the view of getting tourism to a better place and to a more sustained place. So have no fear, tourism is square dead in our line of sight.
and it remains everybody's business.
I have about 4 people lined up there, and then I have Mr. Mona, and then I have a hand there, and then I have you. So, and you will be the last, because we want to wrap up in half an hour. Yeah? Thank you, Mr. Bain.
Pleasant good night to everyone here. Pleasant good night to the Prime Minister and the ministers at their table.
Good night.
My name is Neville Bain, and I'm a small contractor and an architectural designer. I have a question for the Prime Minister, because I think that the Ministry of Planning is under his ministry. I want to ask the Prime Minister here tonight if anything has been done in the recent times to deal with the issues at the Physical Planning Department. Now, I'm asking this question because first I want to say I was a building inspector and I worked in that department in the 70s and the 80s. And today, somewhat, it's not much different. The system is practically the same. I admit that there were a lot of improvements done over the years. But one of the problems that this department has is that since I was there, it's probably the same thing that's happening right now, from what I know. You have the persons who are vetting plans being people from different ministries, like the CTO in health, the chief engineer in the ministry of in Nawasa, chief engineers and people in Grenada. These people are all people who have jobs that require them to be extremely busy. Some of them travel a lot. And so you have the problem where drawings are taking too long to be approved. I have had an instance where one particular project took a year. Now, I want to say this. As a designer, when you design a plan for somebody and you give a person a budget to do a project, given the fact of how building materials are escalating in terms of price now, by the time you get approval for a drawing in a year's time, that person can't do that project again because the price has actually doubled. And so in some cases, if the person gets approval, they may not be able to finance the project anymore because they had to go back to the bank to get more money, and a lot of projects fall by the way because of that. Now, we can't be talking about seriously developing this country and have a situation like that continuing, where you have a drawing going and it takes 3 months before you even sometimes get a reply from the physical planning department as to what is the status of your drawing. We need to have some improvements and bring this thing up to a level where you can have prominent people on a daily basis vetting plans, and not drawings are being sent to a CTO and he get a bulk of drawings and he put them in a corner, and when he could get a little time from his regular job, he look at 2, and then when he get a little time again, he look at 3, and we can't go anywhere as a country like that. This needs to be rectified. I am recommending that the government seriously look at appointing people to permanently sit on a daily basis. That must be their day job, to look at plans and vet plans, so that when people submit drawings, in a matter of a couple of weeks, you could get a response, and you don't have a situation where the board meeting is supposed to be once a month, but this month we can't have board meeting because 2 or 3 of the persons who are on the board not in the island for the meeting and all that stuff. I think we need to move beyond that. This was happening since I was there in the 80s. It is still happening today. And if we seriously want to talk about development of this country, this is one of the aspects that we have to address. Seriously have to address. Get permanent people, appoint permanent people. If it is somebody from the Ministry of Agriculture, that has to be set aside for just doing that. Somebody from the Ministry of Health has to be set aside for just doing that. That's what we had to do. But we need to get, besides that, the correspondence between the physical planning unit and the contractors and the designers and the architects, I mean, it takes too long. a month before you could even get a reply from them as to what is the status on your drawing.
Thank you very much, Mr.
The other
Dean.
issue one more issue I want to raise is this. The question of building inspection also in that department needs to be upgraded, because now we have a situation where we send a drawing for approval, a building inspector comes, he inspects your site, he approves your drawing, and that's it. Nothing else happens until the building is built. And we have situations where, in many cases, clients are being shafted, shortchanged, because there's no continuous inspection during the development of a project, and a lot of contractors just do all sorts of crazy things. They put in less material, they shortchange the client, and people get ripped off. So that also needs to be upgraded.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bain, thank you very much for your comments. You'd probably notice I was nodding my head, because certainly in terms of what needs to improve, I completely agree with you. But let me state quickly that the legislation was in fact passed to convert the planning department into a full-fledged statutory body. We have appointed a board of directors. That board is moving speedily. Well, first, it met a significant backlog of plans, probably hundreds of plans that were not approved and are outstanding. So their first task was, in fact, to just deal with that. They've made significant headway in looking at approving and treating with and communicating back and forth with the outstanding plans. But we anticipate that they will be making recommendations to the cabinet to ensure that the department is fully staffed, that it becomes a full-fledged functioning statutory body, so that some of the issues that you flagged could be addressed. I've also submitted plans to what was then the Planning Authority, and it took a year and a half before they even came back. By then I lost all interest in whatever it is I was interested in. So I'm sure many people have had that experience. So I completely agree with you. It's an area that absolutely needs to be addressed because it hinders the development of Grenada, and I can assure you that within the first half of 2023, that we should be able to report on significant improvements within the planning department. So your comments I have noted, and as I said, I certainly expect that by the middle of next year, we should have a dramatically improved planning authority. And for the record, that includes post-planning approval inspection of construction as well.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I want to congratulate you and your team for a spectacular 100 days in office.
Thank you, sir.
Short of it. But I have a question for Orlando, but apparently he disappeared. The question is, will there be grant funding for people in the creative industry that have the work to be published? Okay.
So the answer is yes, because he talked about the establishment. Well, he's right behind you, so I'll let him answer. You can stand right there.
Any other question? If there will be grant funding.
Speak into the mic, please.
If there will be grant funding for the people in the creative industry who has the work to be published.
The answer is yes. As I mentioned, we do plan to put skin in the game. I think far too often we depend on outside agencies to fund our initiatives. While we do welcome support, but we want to show and demonstrate our seriousness, and we will be starting a cultural and creative development fund to essentially assist via grant funding, via soft loan, whatever the module we decide, to assist creatives who have products, ideas, and services that we deem export ready or has the potential to be export ready, so that we can help them get to the international market.
So let me just add here, the CES program also targets people in the creative industry. So if you are into textiles, if you are into fashion, if you're into sewing, if you're into whatever, there is no limit. In fact, the more creative you are, the more likely you are to get through. The whole point was to allow persons who have some talent, some creative ability, who can demonstrate a business idea that is worth funding to employ themselves and others. You are free to apply. The applications are not closed. You can indicate what your business idea is. It will be assessed. And once you qualify, you get an opportunity for the grant funding as well. So it is not limited just to agriculture and fishing and agro-processing. If you're a musician and you feel you can buy a piece of equipment
to allow you to produce or make music, you are free to apply to the CES Secretariat as well. We have no prejudice when it comes to business ideas and creativity. All right, so I want to re-emphasize that creatives, persons who want to write, who want to sing, who want to dance, who want to make costumes, who need to buy a sewing machine, whatever it is, please apply to the CES Secretariat so that you may be qualified to get a grant.
Okay, quickly, two things. When all is said, that I just like to reiterate that the transformation process is not like instant Nescafe, where you just add water and sugar and you store and you serve your coffee. Okay? We will be transformed over a period of time.
Amen.
And secondly, it seems that today is George Brisbane birthday. Based on one of the quotations, one of the quote he gave me several years ago is like, if the people of Grenada, if the people were patient and voted back the NDC into office in 1995, we would not have incurred that $1.2 billion debt, which is like a millstone around our necks. I said that to say that going forward, historically we are not a patient. Some people get on as if the government in office for 3 years. I just want to reiterate, we have to be patient, and it's not like instant coffee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Right, Jenny. Yes.
It's kind of unusual to see me here, kind of short. No, let me start by saying that Minister Tevin Andrews did not ask me to come here, but I have a problem in Carriacou. You are trying to fix the hospital in St. George's. I think you need to look at Carriacou's hospital first. And I'm saying this to say that you have the land, and it's a little easier to handle if you build a proper hospital in Carriacou. You have had people coming down on the Osprey around a little curtain to get help at the hospital here. It's tough. And if you were to use Carriacou as an example and build a proper hospital, staff it properly, you may find that your tourism situation might be better. Because if you were to travel for health reasons to the Caribbean or to Grenada, I would prefer to go to Carriacou. All right, Tevin, I heard you. But I'm saying this to say that it's easy. I think it's easier. No, I am not a politician, neither do I know finance. But I'm thinking that it might be an easier project to build a proper hospital, staff it, put down all the fancy facilities that everybody else has. We don't, you want an X-ray, you have to go to the Carnage. I mean, I big up the Carnage, I'm from there. We have everything on the Carnage. But at the same time, we need it in the hospital. So if we put one in Carriacou, a proper hospital, and stop, you'll find that you'll get doctors who, close to retirement, may want to come to work in Carriacou because it's an easier iron to handle. So you may find that your staffing might be easier. But please look at Carriacou as putting down a proper hospital there. That thing in St. George's there is a problem. Even driving in, parking, and then you have that gurney coming from what is called the emergency, and you could hardly have a sheet covering them, and they're going across the road. I mean, to me, is a detraction. You feel almost, you want to be unconscious when that's happening to you. You don't want this to happen. It's not nice. So I think you need to put that St. George's project a little on the shelf, not right in the back. But I think you need to give Carriacou, and it's think about it. If I come, they have a lot of Airbnbs in Carriacou. But even to take the transport, even to get on a plane, you can't get on a plane, even though the plane now has 19 seats. You can't get on a plane to get down here fast enough. Maybe you can think in terms of a heliport one of these days, since you want to go alone. If they push you, you're going alone on transportation. But at the same time, let's look at, I think at this point, you need to look at Carriacou as your model for what our hospital is supposed to look like. And that thing there in town, you need to try to find land to move it. There's nothing wrong with land in Granite Town. No problem. We will put the heliport there and all of us will fly to, we'll get to the, whatever it is, the airport and fly up. But that problem and if you give me a nice place to work, I work in hard. But you see the dump you have there? I work to rule. I work in from 8 to 4 and I leave in without even caring at what I left till the next morning. But please, think long and hard about that Carriacou thing. I think you can do it. And that's why I came, because it happened to me on the boat earlier. We had 2 people, and they could only hold one behind the curtain, not so?
Fact.
Right. So the other one has to catch a seat on the thing here. So I'm saying this. So please, think about it. I don't think, it's not rocket science, and it's going to cost you less, I'm certain.
It's a good suggestion. You make Tevin's night for sure.
I know.
But no, it's a very good suggestion. So I've made note of it, and I'm sure as part of the health transformation, we will certainly look at it.
And the other thing I just want to say that when you talked about education, they had this little thing running there, and it's going to be short because I heard, you made your point. But they had this little thing about the USA, Russia, China thinking that they run in the world. And the little Indian said, Prime Minister said, okay, but when you look at all your CEOs, they're all Indian. And you know why? Because while you were quarreling, we were studying. Education is what's going to get us where we want to go. Long and hard. It's the only way to go forward. When we see our name on the ground, we must be able to pick it up. You know what I'm saying? And education is the only way this is going to happen. So a focus, as you say, is one of in the 6, it is important. I'm glad you had tourism not there. Because like you say, it's a ripple effect. It will happen if the others are developed. And that is all I have to say. I wish you guys luck.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I'm going to all right, let me give you all the rundown, So you see it's 9, and we want to do 15 minutes. Now I have Phoebe, then I have Mona. I've seen hands in the back, but my brother, I can't accommodate you.
No, let them come. Let's just line up.
All right, so the Prime Minister said, let them come. No, we ain't burying nobody in the sea. Right, so Phoebe, then I have Mona, then I have this gentleman here. And after that, here is what I'm going to ask you all to do, please.
Hillary.
Go around and line up. So I could, yes, and I saw Hillary. Sorry, Hillary, you will go after, you have to go after this gentleman there.
Let me go.
Right, let's go. Yeah, and one question, please, one question. Thanks, because we need to wrap up.
Good evening, everybody.
Yes, good evening.
Mr. Prime Minister, you gave examples of some significant irregularities of government resources. Are there any plans to get those resolved? And if yes, could you share if you care to? Thank you.
Well, the starting point is to stop them, and we've stopped them. The second point, I've indicated that some of the requests for repayment will not happen. And thirdly, those who think that they deserve the money, they can take the government on. There are other instances that we've not disclosed here, but we certainly, once we have sufficient facts, we will then hand over those facts to the persons in the state who have the authority to do further investigations and make decisions as they see fit. With the government, we're not the police. We could only refer things to the police. We could refer them to the FIU. We could refer them to the Integrity Commission. That's the 3 things we can do, and we leave it from there. Yeah, but the crucial thing is that going forward, and under this administration, is ensuring that we put the necessary checks and balances in place to minimize a recurrence of these issues. Now, in some cases, it's flagrant and it's wanton. In other cases, there's also significant wastage. And frankly, bubble, because there aren't the necessary checks and balances in place in terms of procurement, in terms of contract awards, etc. And I can give you a simple example. The Public Procurement Act says if it's over $15,000, you have to go through a particular tendering process. So how do they get around it? They get around it by issuing 10 contracts for $14,999. It's amongst the same thing. You are basically finding easy ways of, you may honor the spirit of the law, the letter of the law, but you're clearly breaking the spirit of the law. And in many of these concrete contracts that I talked about, when you look at them, you'll see just miraculously the number is 1,498, 1,498, 1,498, that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, nobody's fooling anybody, and it is clear what these things are about. I mean, contracts were awarded to contractors. I'll give an example. There's a contractor in St. David's who was awarded a concrete contract. He has no capacity to finance the contract. No bank will lend him any money. So how is he going to build? If the government doesn't pay him, he can't build. And so the road is 1-1 cocoa. It ain't going nowhere. And everybody's watching and waiting. And the point I'm making is the contract completion date is long past. The contractor has no capacity to deliver. And if the government doesn't pay him, he will not be able to complete the contract. That's reality. And this government isn't going to pay. Right? So it's just a matter of time before the end happens. So I'm saying sometimes you have to give a little rope. But the reality is in many of these instances, there's been a lot of wastage. And a lot of malpractices when it comes to contract management, contract supervision to make sure that we get value for money. Right.
Thank you, Prime Minister. On that note, Prime Minister, it was interesting. I think when I looked in the news today, I saw that St. Lucia just enacted some
special prosecutor legislation
for special
prosecutor legislation.
For special prosecutor legislation. Perhaps it's something that we need to look at so that you don't get bogged down with that, and the independent people can do the investigation and the government goes ahead. So that's just a thought.
Well, yes, I've asked the Prime Minister to send me the sample legislation that they passed in St. Lucia.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Mr. Mona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Prime Minister, Deacon Mitchell, other members of the Cabinet. Pleasant good night, my comrades all. And my dear sister from the town of St. George, Carnage woman again, Carnage tonight. Pleasant good night to you, Miss Claudia Joseph. Mr. Prime Minister, one of the things I would like to see clean up, if we really need this tourism, we have to remember right in the market square, we have a spice market. Saturday gone. I've seen tourists running because man getting cutlass, airs come out in the market square. And these are the things. We have to forget, whether we need to win the support of them young fellas. You want me to train them for you? Them fellas need to join the military, We need to put something in place for these guys. These guys need to go into the army. That is why I love Maurice Bishop. Hope Vale was the best place. If them fellas like to cut grass, we send them in Hope Vale, agriculture. Them fellas have to behave themselves. I grew up all my life on the carriage. I don't smoke, I don't sell, and I ain't borrowing. The next thing is, to my dear sister, the Attorney General. Sometime back, I end up in the hands of the police through politics. I nearly got killed in South Central Police Station. And the thing is, I lost every matter until my dear little doctor home. She said, you know what, Sheldon, you're very determined, even though we have to go to the Privy Council. And I won the state of Grenada. And Dwight Hosford failed to pay the money, and the court gave me the authority. They said I was tried in the darkness, and they give me the opportunity that I can take the state back to court, and they do not want to negotiate. So my lawyers, I am asking the government of Grenada to negotiate the matter. They're owing some monies because we was awarded some money, or I will forget, because it's not about the NDC team. Is about what have to be done. And what I'm saying, I want the state and I need my money. So, Mr. Attorney General, I want the state to pay me. And we could negotiate and we could settle the matter or going back to court. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mona.
Sure. Right. The Minister of Health would like to respond before. Go ahead.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Not to the court matter. Lady Williams, I believe, the one that
went before.
Health.
Yeah. Woodruff.
Lady Woodruff. My vision for Grenada's healthcare sector is that we become the healthcare capital of the Eastern Caribbean. And it's a vision and mission I'm yet to share with my technical administrative team. And we plan to do that through strengthening systems, building resilience, through health diplomacy and compassionate care. I don't want history to repeat itself tomorrow morning when I enter the Ministry of Health. And let me qualify what I'm saying. I respect how you feel about the healthcare sector and the current physical infrastructure, and to some extent, administrative, managerial infrastructure. Do we have dire existing challenges and gaps in the healthcare sector that we need to address? Of course. Do we have many administrators and managers who sit or preside over our healthcare sector, as well as clinicians who need to step up and do better? Of course. But I respect our doctors and nurses, those who put their hands to the plow every day, in spite of the deficiency in resources, in spite of the deficiency in human resources, material resources, and they show up 7 to 7. They may grumble, but they work. I've visited the hospitals, all 3 of them, various clinics and outpost stations. And there are a number of medical practitioners who will give their blood for the healthcare sector. So by saying that, words such as abattoir, the thing, etc., while I appreciate the disgust for the sector, because it is a sector that needs to be revamped, I want to send out an appreciation for my healthcare practitioners who work day and night to still ensure that we have a semblance of a health sector that is still functioning in some way or the other.
Yes. Mr. Mona, you know, we chuckle at how Mr. Mona mentioned his situation with the unpaid judgment. But I want to say it's actually a serious matter. One of the other areas of neglect of our citizens by the previous administration is ignoring the courts in general, failing to comply with orders of the court, from an order to pay pension to an order to pay a citizen compensation for wrongs committed by the state, to flagrantly flouting the Constitution, so that with the assistance of the staff at the Attorney General's office and the debt management unit of the Ministry of Finance, we have put together a matrix attempting to categorize and put in one place all of the outstanding judgments that the state has in relation to our citizens. And so far, that amounts to just under $40 million. So while there was a lot of wastage of hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars between faith development and CJs and the election projects, there was about $40 million, there is rather, over $40 million owed to ordinary citizens who took legitimate actions against the state. And Prime Minister, Minister of Finance and I, we are working on liquidating those debts because those actually form part of our national debt, which I'm not sure is usually added. And some of them are of quite some vintage. They go way back. So our people have not been receiving justice in this country, even when the court makes orders. And yes, Mr. Mona, I saw your name on the list. And just to mention, good night to all the Grenada people. It's nice to see so many of my neighbors and friends here. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Hilary Alexander. Good evening to the head table. I want to congratulate Team NDC for a job well done for your first 100 days. My question is to the Minister of Education. I have 2 children with disability, and I know there is a desk for children with disability. However, I have been there a number of times, and nothing seems to be happening. We have a few deficiencies in the schools across Grenada. We have children with disability waiting to enter schools. And because there is no space, the children are outside waiting. So I'm wondering if the ministry is looking into building more schools for children with disability, or if they have anything in mind when it comes to disability in Grenada. I also noticed that the curriculum, there isn't anything much when it comes to training, skill training centers for children with disabilities. So after they leave the Limes or leave Victoria, wherever the school is, we have 3 in Grenada, nothing happens with them after that. Even though they have the ability to do things like housekeeping, cooking, whatever. They have abilities and they can do a number of things. So I'm asking, and I noted that on the list of priorities for the upcoming budget, education is part of it. I'm really concerned about disability in Grenada, not because I have a child or children with disability. I also noted that we have problem with even teachers in schools calling children names. So we need to train teachers also. So we need training for teachers. I need you to give me a response if you can. Let me know if there is any plans in place for children with disability, or disability in general in Grenada. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your question. Indeed, children with special needs are important to us. In fact, we do have, as you correctly identified, we have a couple officers, a desk at the ministry, but we are currently making representation to make that into a full-fledged department to be able to increase the degree of services that we offer to students and the community of special needs persons. So we are looking to have 3 or 4 more officers. In fact, we have already made representation to the Department of Public Administration to have additional officers hired to strengthen our offering. We do have 2 itinerant teachers, a couple itinerant teachers that go, because we work with mainstreaming as well, because one of the things we are cognizant of is that we don't necessarily want to exclude persons with special needs from the mainstream if we can avoid it, because there are varying degrees of impairment and disabilities, and we don't see an undue reason to have all students with special needs lumped into one place when we need them to be integrated and to live in the society as regular human beings who can contribute. We understand we have to make the accommodations, and so new builds are built to accommodate them. We have some itinerant officers who are able to work specifically with them in schools, but I admit we do not have the capacity at the moment, and that's why we're talking about increasing the staffing to be able to reach out to them. I don't know that at the moment we have in mind to construct any new buildings, but you've just registered a thought for us, so it's something that we probably can consider, can look into and look at the feasibility, the real need. So we take that, but we are certainly looking at increasing our offerings. And in terms of training to teachers, that often is ongoing. Within the last couple of years, I know we've had consultancies to look at early identification. I know within the Student Support Services Unit, we've from time to time worked with teachers to see how we can sensitize them to ensure that they are a lot more aware of what to look for, to identify students as early as possible with the challenges so that we can more meaningfully address their concerns and provide and develop more tailored educational plans. So it's a work in progress. Obviously, we have a bit more to do, but I know we do have some structure, and we have been working, and it's our commitment to keep improving our offerings and deliveries to students with special needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Good evening to our dear Prime Minister, Comrade Deacon Mitchell.
Good evening, sir.
Special good evening to my parliamentary representative, Mr. Andy Williams, and to the men and women of valor at the head table. Special good evening. I have 2 questions, but before I go into this 2 questions, I would like to say something. First of all, I would like to applaud the cabinet of making this decision to make October 19th a public holiday. Also make that period from October 19th to the 25th a day of commemoration. Excellent. And within that period, I'd also like for the cabinet to also pay particular attention and recognize our fallen soldiers that who give their life for their country on October the 25th. Also, make a special mention of those comrades who lost their life. I will start with the Minister of Health or Social Development. Concerning the men and women, and we see a lot of young men and women that suffer from substance abuse, and seemingly there is no place to put them at this present time. Maybe knowing that they go to the general hospital and sent to the mental home. But I would like to see, or we would like to see, something reminiscent of the Carlton home being established. So I would like to know how soon that we can see an institution where we can treat our young men and women who are suffering from substance abuse will be established.
And you could do the second question and then...
Okay. Second question is in terms of agriculture. We, in a form of transformation, and growing our economy. And we see, when we look around, a lot of fruits being spoiled. Agriculture is one of the 6 pillars to drive the transformation forward. What are we doing in terms of agro-processing to help develop our Tri-Island state? Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Pre-pandemic and a little bit post-pandemic, I was still in the education sector and had the opportunity to see education practitioners deal with a wave of mental health issues at the school level. That formed part of my experience. Sitting in the seat as Minister with responsibility for health, I am of the opinion also that alongside the 2019 COVID pandemic was running concurrently another pandemic, and that's a mental health pandemic. In fact, we always say that Caribbean people are resilient. And sometimes the craziness behind our the craziness behind our smiles and our resilience is taken for granted. I don't want in the next 3 to 4 years we begin to have a mental health problem that we should have planned for 3 years before. So one of the thrusts or policy decisions that we have taken at the Ministry of Health, we've just received funding through the EIB, that's the European Investment Bank, through CDB, to champion a number of projects in the health sector that's going to speak to some degree of sustainability in the health sector. We have decided through consultation to have a singular focus where the health sector is concerned and the start of the transformation process. And we've decided to go with mental health. So as of next year, God's willing, maybe by the first quarter of next year, you will begin to see a national destigmatization campaign coming on stream where mental health is concerned, but also the rebuilding of Carlton House. I want to state emphatically though, the vision for Carlton House 14, 18 years ago can't be the same vision in 2022. It must evolve. Yes, and also the construction of a rehabilitative clinic together with Carlton House. I believe that is the way to go as it relates to the funding we've received, enough so that we can see the construction of these 2 facilities with a destigmatization campaign and national consultation on the Mental Health Act of 2006. Some amendments were done to the Act in 2008. But when you look at the Act now, 14 or 15 years later, it's seriously outdated. I was advised that the World Health Organization now have legislations on mental health for Commonwealth countries. So currently we're reading through those legislations with legal counsel to ensure that we can contextualize what we want to see as our new Mental Health Act moving forward. So mental health is on the priority agenda. So,
thank you, and I believe, yes.
Give us some good juice. Beautiful. Good night, comrades, again. We campaign very heavy on agriculture. Our manifesto speaks loud on agriculture, and the Prime Minister has indicated in no uncertain terms that agriculture, in his presentation, that agriculture is one of the main pillars. You asked a question about agro-industry. I would like to inform the nation tonight that we have already established a unit in the Ministry of Agriculture just to coordinate the whole question of agro-industry. We have come to the conclusion that the agro-processing that is taking place in the kitchen and under the house must be developed in such a way that we can step out into the industrial parks, industrial estates, where we can standardize the product so that when tamarind balls are living Grenada, some don't taste hotter than the other, or they don't taste that different to the others. We want to have that standard. And we also want to have the packaging, the labeling. We want to make sure that all those things, when we're talking about made in Grenada, it has some similarities. So agro-processing is very high on the agenda, and you'll be hearing more about it. Once we establish the unit, people will be coming to you to find out what you are doing, what help you need, and how we can better the industry.
Thank you. So I see we are winding down, and we have 3 more people, and then we can invite Karine. So yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good night, my Prime Minister.
Good night.
Congratulations to everybody.
Thank you.
I'm Miss Janet Johnson from the New York chapter. And I'd like to say that myself and the secretary of the New York chapter, Mrs. Denise Roberts, we worked very hard, for this, to have you guys in this position, and I thank you guys for everything. And Mr. Lacrette, well, I got my answer. I came to ask you a question, and I got my answer, because I want to come back to Grenada. And I have a lot of people behind me, but our main thing is the health. So I'm here now, they will be behind me, and as the Prime Minister say, I want to know that I can come here to go to the hospital and have a tummy tuck, So I can go and enjoy myself in the hospital in Carriacou and on the most famous beach paradise in Carriacou. No offense, Mr. Williams, but I'm heading to Carriacou. Thank you, guys.
Yes, praise the Lord. Good night.
Good night.
Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell. You is the best Mitchell. The better Mitchell. Yeah. And the rest of the head table.
Good night to you.
And those in the audience. My name is Paul Thomas. I born in Fountainoy, St. George's, and I grew up in Marion, St. George's. And the question what I asking you tonight, I never hear it on the political campaign. None of the political party never really speak about that. But some years ago, some Caribbean government was planning a fast ferry service to carry passengers from one country to another country in the Caribbean. My question is this transportation initiative still in the pipeline?
Yes, the answer is yes. At 2 CARICOM meetings that I attended, both in Suriname and in Trinidad. In fact, Trinidad and Guyana are leading the discussions on behalf of CARICOM to address the question of a fast ferry service, both for passenger and cargo, and critically for cargo. So this is something, in fact, the concept behind it is that they'll create different hubs. So you'll have a southern hub, Guyana, Trinidad, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
and then you look to potentially having a northern hub. We recognize that the whole question of transportation, not just air transportation, but sea transportation, and in particular cargo, is critical. And we need to reorient where we get things from. And I'll give a good example. By boat, Brazil is closer, and by land, because if you get to Guyana, you can drive to Brazil, right? But the fact is, our orientation has always been to the north. So we buy everything from the north. And even if we get it from the south, it goes north and then comes back down, right? So as governments and as a region, we have to reorient. And the same goes for Africa. It's 6 hours from Accra. But there's no direct flights from the continent of Africa to the Caribbean, right? And again, Africa has the potential and one day will become the breadbasket of the world. So I'm just saying this to say that the fast ferry cargo particular service is of critical importance if we are really going to deal with food security and logistics within the region, and it's something that is still on the agenda and very much being pursued at the CARICOM level. We are looking at funding from some of the Gulf Arab states, potentially to fund the acquisition and development of these ferry services.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother. But my brother, as you come, I just want to, there's a question that came in from the diaspora, Prime Minister, and the question is about oil and gas. And what is the present position?
All right, so we are continuing to research the status of Grenada's oil and gas deposits, as well as Grenada's contractual obligations. This has not been a situation where information, we have to understand, unfortunately, the challenges of our system of governance, and there's some structural changes that we're going to have to be made. While when you get into power, a permanent secretary may provide you with a transition document, the actual policy makers, there is no handover. You don't sit down with the former Minister of Energy, and he doesn't give you a list of all the things he's working on and where we are and what we need to do next. If ever it's the opposite, they hide, they probably destroy, they probably wish you just don't find out, right? So, the saga for oil and gas is now over a decade, and so we have to, on our own, honor, dig up, interview, research the current status of this. The Attorney General's department is doing some of that. I'm also doing some of that, and we believe come early in 2023, we'll be in a position to report to the nation on the status of our hydrocarbon contractual obligations, as well as the status of the actual deposits and the commercial viability.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So, penultimate and then final gentleman behind, and then we invite Minister. So, go ahead, brother.
Pleasant good evening to, well, good night.
Good night.
To everyone in the audience. A heartfelt good night to ministers and senators. A special good night to His Excellency, Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell.
Good night, sir. Thank you.
What is the suggested time frame for the approximate 15,000 public workers as it relates to pension reform? And with approximate 2.8 billion acres of idle lands, is the agriculture sector really preparing to assist and addressing and assisting the pension issue?
All right, repeat the questions, if you don't mind.
No problem. What is the suggested time frame for the approximate 15,000 public workers as it relates to pension reform?
Right, and the second?
With an approximate 2.8 billion acres of idle lands in this country, what is the agriculture sector? Is the agriculture sector really preparing to assist in addressing and assisting pension reform?
All right, good, interesting questions. So I think you might have come in a little late. So we talked about the situation with pension reform. I will say the suggested timeline for us is 12 months. suggested. We've already put the pension reform committee in place. We've invited the Trade Unions Council to have a representative on that committee, and we're really hoping that within 12 months, as of November 30th of this year, 12 months from the end of November, that we would be in a position, we hope, to have agreement on the kind of reforms that are required to allow a sustained pension plan for public workers. Now, you quoted 15,000, and in a sense, one could say anybody who, let me put it this way, not everybody who works for the government is a public servant. And not everybody who gets a government check is a public servant. And I can tell you, if the public service stays at 15,000 people, there's no way the government is going to be able to pay pension for 15,000 people in the current construct. Right? In the current construct, the government pension, as per the pension laws on the books, basically requires the government alone to fund that pension. The employees do not contribute at all. And on top of that, you then have the government's contribution to the National Insurance Fund. That is not sustainable. The government simply will not be able to afford it, and it will not be able to afford it in short order, 15, 10, 20 years from now. So the reality is the pension reform has to happen so that we have a contributory pension system in place. That's the bottom line. And a single pension. The government can't be contributing towards two pension schemes for the same set of workers, and you then have large numbers of persons who do not have a pension. Because when they don't have a pension and they get to 60, it's the same government they're coming back for all kinds of social security programs. And that is the risk we face now. So you see like Ms. Lett, who has talked about the fact that maybe, hopefully, she'll have an NIS pension. But if she doesn't have an NIS pension and she's not working, where is she going to get the money from to live on? Right? It's going to be some form of social security. So we hope that as a country, we will recognize that all work is valuable and that we have to put a system in place that allows both the private sector, the national insurance scheme, and the government to come up with an arrangement that allows for most of all of the citizens of Grenada who work to get some form of pension that is in my view, at least contributory pension that both parties can contribute to. So we are looking at a 12-month period for the public sector. But while I'm on this, I'm also going to say the Minister of Social Security has not spoken much tonight, but the National Insurance Scheme also requires significant reform to keep that scheme solvent. If we don't take action now, and when I say now, by the first quarter of 2023, in less than 10 years, NIS will not have funds to pay benefits as they arise. In fact, it might be closer to like 5 years, I think. Right? So that is another area that needs reform. So pension reform is not just for the public sector. It also would apply to the national insurance scheme. The question on agriculture is interesting because, to me, if we are able to see that our food security and ramping up our agricultural production or agro-processing or diversification or food storage is directly linked to our health and our wealth, then it will also address the question of how we are able to create pensions for ourselves. Because the reality is, if you work for yourself, and she's not here now, but she raised the issue earlier of retirement plans, saving plans, and how we treat with ensuring that financial literacy, financial planning and investing for retirement is done, then people must eat. And it's projected that we'll move from 7 to 9 billion people. And therefore, feeding the population is going to become even more important, including our population. And therefore, from the point of view of what areas should one invest in, with the long-term aim of having being an industry that people will always need food from, agriculture certainly is one such industry. Despite its vulnerabilities, people still need to eat. So from where we sit, the more people invest in agriculture, the more we believe it has the capacity to create intergenerational wealth. And it clearly happened in the past. The nutmeg farmers were able to educate their children and send them to schools all over the world. And the nutmeg lands are still there. And in many instances, although these children don't come back, if they wanted to, they could still come back and farm the land they could still come back and get the sales of the nutmegs and use it as their retirement and supplementary income, if they wanted to. And the same will apply for a lot of the other crops that we have in Grenada. I don't know if, because it's a very interesting question that you posed, I don't know if there are other aspects of agriculture that you think is linked to pension that you may want to share with us. Remember, it's a Townhall, it's not just question and answer. If you have ideas, we are free to hear them.
No problem. From a personal perspective, in terms of agriculture, we all come back down to processing, agro-processing. And in order to gain income, we need to decrease the food import bill. Now, a lot of talk has been occurring in the past about it. And how do we go forward as a nation in order to rectify everything with a specific time frame for successfully achieving a high export in terms of monetary income into the country, and how would it assist in basically lifting a lot of us and Grenadians out of poverty?
All right, well, I think the Minister of Agriculture talked about the fact that he's putting in place an agro-processing committee. But outside of that, it's going to be a lot of, well, we have a commitment to reduce our food import bill by 25% by 2025. So we're in 2022, that's in 3 years' time. We want to, it's a CARICOM-wide commitment that Grenada signed upon, and we are serious about achieving that. By 2025, we want to reduce, that's 3 years, 36 months. We want to reduce our food import bill by 20%, and by 25%. And there are specific areas that we intend to target. Meat, for instance. We import a lot of chicken. Too much. We can certainly grow our own chicken, and we can certainly consume more of our own fish. We need to boost a lot of our livestock production, goat, sheep, pigs, rabbits. So our policies will be directly targeted at a small scale and in a ramped up fashion at boosting production in those areas. But it's not just the question of the production. We then have to have the abattoirs. We have to have the trading, right? We have to have the cold storage that allows us to assist in storing food, because that's part of the problem here in Grenada. A lot of food goes to waste. We can just take things like fruits, watermelons, those kinds of things. We can extend the shelf life by having the cold storage. So, but cold storage requires electricity. And if the cost of electricity is too high, it becomes expensive. Hence the reason why we need to focus on renewables, use solar panels, etc. So it's all integrated, but we recognize that we have to plan, we have to set the targets, and then we work towards it. And that's really ultimately the goal that we're looking at. Let's take chocolate production, for example. There are a lot of small chocolate production taking place, but Grenada itself has no overall strategy for branding our chocolates. And it's not just production, it's also intellectual property, it's also marketing strategy. If we can brand our chocolate as unique, everybody talks about Swiss chocolate. They don't produce no chocolate, they don't grow cocoa in Switzerland. Everybody talks about Belgian chocolate. Cocoa trees can't grow there, right? And that's just simple examples. In Grenada, the cocoa actually grows. So it's also part about marketing and ensuring that you can get higher premiums for your product and things like organic chocolate. So a lot of it requires some sophistication in terms of our marketing, in terms of our trade policy, in terms of ensuring that our diplomats understand that their job is to push the exports of Grenadian products, and that when they come home, they're briefed about what it is we're trying to do, what are the products we need to sell, what are the areas we want people to invest in. I'll give a good example. GIDC. When you go to the GIDC, for the most part, you tell them where you want to invest, if you're a foreign investor. GIDC doesn't have 8 or 10 projects when you walk in that says, these are the areas that Grenada needs investment in. Energy transition, the marine economy, agro-processing. It doesn't say we have an actual plant or product that requires $100 million or $50 million or $10 million, and if you invest in it, this is where the plant is going to be located, this is what it costs to build, this is the number of people to employ. You have to go and do that research yourself and come to GIDC. We plan to turn that around. So when we say we want renewable energy, we should be able to identify the sites where the solar panels are going to go. When we say we want solar energy, we should be able to identify these are the sites that we think are best suited for solar energy. When we say we have a geothermal project, and we do, we have 2 sites where we plan to drill 2 testing holes, one in St. John and one in St. Patrick. The cost of it is 140 million US dollars, we should be able to say to them, we want you to invest in renewable energy. It will take 5 to 7 years before it goes to production. The cost is 140 million. This is the incentives for doing it. This is the amount of electricity it will produce. This is the number of people it will employ. That is where we want you to invest in. Right? So I'm saying that is the kind of thing that we need to do. And again, if the energy is cheaper, we can do more agro-processing, et cetera, et cetera. So it's having a coordinated approach and a planned approach to the development of Grenada. And we're only 100,000 people. It ain't that hard, despite what they've told. There are countries with a lot more people that plan their development and they do it far more rapidly than we have, because we've never planned the development. So I'm saying this to say, for agro-processing, electricity is a significant issue, right? And so we will develop a systematic policy that addresses ensuring that agro-processors get cheaper electricity to ensure that the agro-processing can go on. So thank you.
Right. Night, everybody. We're very happy to have you people up there. Nice to see you. And I'm very happy that we have a budget that is basically for health. I'm Dr. Frederick, retired pediatrician. And I'm here with only 2 questions. One, I would very much like if you could bring back the nursing school back to the hospital. Very important. They are studying yes in the School of Medicine. I have nothing against the School of Medicine, but we need the hands-on preparation. Secondly, I'm very short. The students are studying abroad in Cuba. Could you ask them if they're willing and able to remain and specialize instead of coming back as general practitioners? We have too much of them now, and most of them are going to School of Medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frederick. I will ask the Minister of Health to respond.
Dr. Frederick, thank you very much for your question. From a partnership perspective, I am going to just say that we are going to look at your first question, because in various circles, it is a concern to a number of practitioners in the system, and that's healthcare practitioners. So it's something, I'm going to be honest with you, something that we're definitely going to look at. But in the spirit of partnership, diplomacy and negotiation, we have to be extremely careful how we look at it, because you want to be able to keep the goodwill of your partners. And I'll leave that there with a full stop for now. And secondly, with the doctors in Cuba, I quite agree with you to healthcare practitioners' perspective. We do need, in fact, one of the deficiencies in human resource that we have from a clinical perspective, is the deficiency in specialist areas. So thank you very much for that recommendation. It's well taken, well placed, and we'll look into it as it relates to having a dialogue with our Cuban counterparts.
So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the question and answer period. And so you realize, given all of the responses, you realize we answer all the questions? This government not sticking, you know. We are making things happen, brothers and sisters. I mean, you know, and the young, there are plenty things to happen in a short time. We'll continue along that road. And so without further ado, brothers and sisters, I want to call to the microphone for a vote of thanks and closing remarks, Honorable Karine James.
Minister Andrews from Carriacou, I promise not to be that lengthy. And thank you, Mr. Chair. Prime Minister, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, colleague ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, specially invited guests, online viewers, a pleasant evening to you. This evening, I am honored to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of our administration and for this special occasion, marking and celebrating our first 100 days in office. I hope you have all enjoyed this informative session our government organized for you today. And so, on behalf of the entire team, those present as well as those not here with us, I extend a very hearty thanks to all the speakers for sharing with us their reports, findings, and opinions today. We thank Mr. Bido and the staff of the Grenada Trade Center for such comfortable facilities. We thank the technical team responsible for those who are not physically here with us being able to see and participate. Your function is critical, and without you, our messages would have limited reach today. Thank you. I also take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to the entire organizing team for the logistics support and for all the undying efforts they've put into making this event a success. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it. This new administration has only been in office just shy of 4 months. And as you have seen and heard, we have made tremendous strides towards moving and achieving our transformational agenda. The payment of dock salaries, the payment of pension, remedying inter-island travel, and our commitment to dealing with the regularization of public officers are just a few of what we were able to achieve. Indeed, determination, tenacity, and willpower of this team cannot go unnoticed. This team is the epitome of the saying, from nothing to something. So make no mistake that this country will move forward under this administration. And last but not least, we thank you, the people of the state of Grenada, and our committed and loyal support base for being here to energize us and reassure us that when we put people first, we cannot fail. We are keeping our election promises by engaging the general public and supporters of our activities and plans. We will continue to engage in activities of this nature to ensure that the citizens are aware of our business. Once again, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And thank you very much, Sister Karine, for those words. Ladies and gentlemen, here endeth the lessons for the evening. We thank you very, very much for coming out and look forward to seeing us in another 3 months or so. The Prime Minister did say that he is committed to doing these things, to hear from you and to let you know what's happening. So look out for us perhaps in January or early February. Thank you very much. Have a blessed night. Get home safely. And we'll see you again.